zoning meeting. Could we have the roll call, please?
Chair Dennis Lipp. Vice Chair Robin Crawford. Committee Member Lawrence Corning. Committee Member Keith Harris.
Here.
Committee Member Grace Joyce.
Here.
There's Town Manager Mark Cutney.
Here.
Town Clerk, but Office Coordinator Steve Hainline. Town Planner Jim Fleshman. Town Engineer Patrick Figuerella.
Here.
Town Attorney.
And Town Attorney Mike Cirillo.
What's his name?
I know. I deal with you daily. I know.
I've had one of those days. Good read this.
Okay, for those in attendance tonight, we actually have three meetings here, one after the other. The first is the Planning and Zoning Board, to which we are on the now the second item, which is the swearing in of our new alternate, Debbie Castellone. And Mike?
Raise your right hand, and what we'll do is there is the oath, and what I'll do, I'll read it, and you say I do, I will, whatever you're comfortable with at the end. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support, protect, and defend the Constitution and government of the United States and of the state of Florida and of the charter of the town of Loxahatchee Groves, that I am duly qualified to hold office under the Constitution of the state and the charter of the town of Loxahatchee Groves, and that I will well and faithfully perform the duties of board member upon which I am now about to enter.
I will.
Thank you. Welcome.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, this meeting is then adjourned. Now we'll start not so quick. Now we'll start the meeting of the local planning agency, the LPA, and this is the public hearing. And we'll start that up again with the roll call. You just have to do the board.
Chair Dennis Lipp.
Here.
Vice Chair Robin Crawford. Committee Member Lawrence Corning.
Here.
Committee Member Keith Harris.
Here.
Committee Member Grace Joyce.
Here.
And alternate member Debbie Castellone.
Here.
Absent is alternate member Veronica Close.
All right, we have two things we're going to be discussing this evening. Mr. Fleischman had asked that we modify the agenda, so Jim, if you could introduce those modifications so we can vote on them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under Planning and Zoning Board, under new business, item A, amendments to Loxahatchee Groves Unified Land Development Code. That actually should be heard during the LPA meeting.
Okay.
So I'd like to move that from 4A under Planning and Zoning Board to item number 3 under the local planning agency. And
All right, and that dealt specifically with,
that's the plain new, the proposed plain new development ordinance.
all right,
And it's required by code that the LPA consider.
all right.
And also.
I have a comment.
Great.
My concern is that, my question is, was it noticed properly as a public hearing? I know that we're just an advisory board to the council, but I really thought that this was the first that I heard of this. I got my agenda packet on Tuesday, and it's a lot to digest. And I thought tonight we were going to discuss it, because I do have a lot of questions regarding this. And I personally I'm not prepared to vote on that based on the information that I currently have. And I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, if I may, according to the town's code, the only notice for the text amendment to the ULDC is posting at the town hall, which it was.
It's just posting at the town hall?
Yes.
You don't have to advertise?
Not for the LPA.
Not for the LPA.
Yeah, and I anticipated that this, that the LPA may not take action on this tonight because it is a lot to digest. We have a schedule for several projects that I'm going to go over in a minute. And it's not critical that we act on it this month, but we certainly would like that to happen next month if that's possible. So maybe if it's the desire of the LPA not to take any action tonight, we could at least have discussion. And if there are any changes that need to be made between now and next month, staff will work on making those changes and bring back a more satisfactory document.
I would feel comfortable with that. I'm not sure how everybody else feels, but.
Sure, just to answer the question, the notice did have, for this item, was planning and zoning / LPA. So whichever part of the meeting is in, it's fine, at least with the post to answer that question.
Thank you.
How you all decide to deal with the application is your property.
Well, we will discuss that amongst ourselves when we come to that item. So we'll move forward. Everybody good with that?
So is that agreeable to move it up to the LPA?
Yeah, we're gonna move it up, well, yes, without objection, we'll move this to the LPA.
As long as we have the option not to take action on it,
Right.
if we don't feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Even if it's under LPA, so I don't see what
Probably always have that.
the difference is, but okay. Okay.
The other items that I'd like to add under the planning and zoning board, under item 4, new business, I'd like to add A, lots of Hatchie Rose Commons, discussion only, and 4B, Palm Beach State College, discussion only. Both of these proposed projects are, we've established a fairly tight schedule that gets real tight during the summer. And we felt that this would be a good opportunity for the P&Z board to have an informal discussion to see what Loch Hatchie Grove Commons and State College are proposing in terms of some more detailed plans than you're going to see as part of the land use plan amendments tonight, so that we'll have an opportunity to ask the questions and maybe get some answers early in the process, so that when they formally come back, if there are any issues, hopefully they can be addressed.
All right. Jim, I rely upon you to keep us on task this evening, since I didn't have these on my printed agenda here. All right. So we're moving on then to the large-scale amendment 2A, project 12-1, the Simon property request to rescind MLU and revert to rural residential 5 in part of the and assign commercial low in part. So that is A, and we'll hear from staff.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to start out by just giving a little bit of history on these two projects. I'm sure that everyone in the room is somewhat aware, but I just want to do a brief lead-in rather than do it twice. I'll do it with Amendment 12-1. As I stated, over the next several months, we're going to be having several items come before either the LPA or the P&Z related to the Simon property, which is the 97-acre parcel at the northwest corner of southern Palm. And basically, there are going to be two issues that we're going to be considering, even though we're going to be looking at several applications and several potential approvals. The first is the 22-acre Loxahatchee Groves Commons, which is a proposed commercial development, approximately 22 acres at the northwest corner, 22 acres of the 97-acre Simon property. And the balance, the second project is the proposed Palm Beach State College campus, which is proposed to occur on the balance of the property.
Northwest corner,
Yeah.
Southeast.
southeast.
Northwest corner of the intersection.
So,
It's the southeast corner of B and southern, but the northwest corner of the parcel.
it's the northwest corner of B Road, so.
Oh, the northwest corner of B. That's what you're saying.
Gotcha. All right.
In the southeast corner of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The southeast corner of the northwest corner is lot line of the town. And the balance of the property, 75 acres, that wraps around the property, is the proposed Palm Beach State College campus. So with that as a lead-in, I'll start with the amendment 12-1. Amendment 12-1 is a proposal to rescind the existing multiple land use designation that falls over the entire 97-acre Simon property, and also at the same time assign a commercial low designation to the 22-acre southeast front. In addition to rescinding the multiple land use amendment on the 97 acres, the proposal will also rescind the special policy that was incorporated into the future land use element of the comprehensive plan that up to this point governs development on the parcel. The multiple land use designation as it currently stands consists of three land uses: commercial low office. Both of those designations constitute approximately 20 acres each, and they lie along the northern extent of Southern Boulevard, the full extent of the property. Behind the commercial frontage is 55 acres of rural residential 5. So we have three land use designations under multiple land use at this point: commercial office, and rural residential 5. The special policy also limits the specific development potential in each of those land use categories. The commercial low parcel at the corner is limited currently to a maximum of just over 91,000 square feet of commercial retail type uses. The 20 acres of commercial low office has a limitation of 130,000 square feet of office uses. And the residential portion of the property on the back, at 55 acres, is currently limited to 19 residential units. So the application, as I stated, is oriented to rescinding the multiple land use on the entire parcel, and then assigning commercial low to the corner 22-acre parcel, and at the same time rescinding the special policy that currently governs the uses and intensity on the entire parcel.
And those who are paying close attention, the 77 plus acres will then revert back to the original RR5. So that is the result of that. Just as a side comment here, anybody who would like to make a public comment at the end of this, before we move on to the next thing, see Steve for public comment cards, and turn those into Steve, so we're not passing a bunch of stuff back and forth here, and Steve will manage comment cards and call them out at the appropriate time. So Jim, go ahead.
Chairman.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, haven't you given up the RR5 at this point? There's no more RR5 on it.
There is RR5 on 55 acres under the
And you want to go back to all ML, all RR5?
No, the proposal is to go back to 75 acres of RR5 to accommodate the state college. And 21 acres at the corner of the wall. And if you take a look at page 5 of the staff report, table 2, you can see under the land use designations, what the maximum development potential will be under the MLU as it is now, and under the proposed land use mix of RF5. The MLU currently allows 91,476 square feet of commercial load. That number, 182,000, that's it's up to 200 special policy. 91,000 square feet of commercial load, 130,000 square feet of commercial load office, and 19 housing units. Under the amendment 12-1 allocation, and this is looking at solely land use designations, not necessarily the ultimate use of the college. The proposed land use designation would allow 94,000 square feet of commercial load, no commercial load office, and 15 housing units.
You can build the college with the existing approvals, right?
The college needs 75 acres, and the rural residential 5 land use designation, which allows public schools, is the appropriate designation. And that's what they're applying for.
No, the way it is now, they could not, because it's a multiple land use designation for the entire 97-acre parcel. So that's why basically, political term etch-a-sketching this. They're gonna go back, and they're asking you to go back and then reconfigure the designation at this point. Basically undo what you did in August. What you guys did, the council did, you weren't here, so this is your first chance to look at this one.
Any questions answered, gentlemen?
Yeah.
Great, any comment?
I have a question as it pertains to the first part of the application, and then there was the justification for the traffic generation comparison. It seems to me that the trips should be a whole lot less based on, the reduction of the commercial low office. You know, I didn't realize that it wasn't 182,000, but, it's 130,000 less square feet of commercial low office and 3 less residential units, but only 1,200 decrease in trips. I just,
Yeah, that's what the traffic study said.
We're not really talking about commercial home office, we're talking about a lot of commuting students coming in every couple hours to change classes.
Yeah, what you, yeah, I understand your concern. What you need to do at this point is separate the issue of land use with what the ultimate development will be. And the state college is subject to traffic concurrency under the Palm Beach County. So as they come in for the approvals, they're going to have to undergo the detailed scrutiny by the county and consultant traffic engineers to ensure that the project meets the traffic performance.
This, what I was talking about was just in reference to the change in the commercial use. It didn't have anything to do with the college. It was something, I guess, the applicant submitted?
The traffic study, yes.
Yeah. Okay, I was just surprised, I thought it would have been more.
And the revised application did submit letters from all of the various service providers indicating that all of the town's infrastructure level of service standards will be complied with. So,
Yes.
Jim, so basically, the discussion that, and the vote that is gonna take place on this, what we're going to be voting on, is rescinding the mixed-use land use designation, and then going back to what we originally asked for in the first place from the state, which is the R5, and the 22 acres now going to commercial low. So, okay, I just wanted to make sure that I understood that. So any comments pertaining to the college would be part of this next application that
yes.
we're going to hear?
Yes.
Okay. Well, my comment about this is just that. I mean, when we originally incorporated, this was RR5, the entire site was. It was consistent with what the town wanted. Maybe we got a little ahead of ourselves going through with the mixed-use land use to get the development in place. So it seems to me to make sense to go back to that and you know, let's go back to what we originally wanted. We found that the original request for the 130,000 square feet of commercial low office and the 91,000 square feet of commercial low was consistent with the comp plan. So what they're asking for in this case is much less. So based on the staff's report and analysis of the comp plan, I would make a motion to approve the request based on the findings in the staff report and the consistency with the comp plan.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second, please? Not hearing a, let's have some discussion on this. I think that,
Why is the college needing to go back to R5 instead of fitting into these the MLUs, build schools and close?
Okay, institutional is not one of the language designations on the MLU right now.
The MOU was set up with 3 specific uses, and the college is not one of the uses that could be used as it's currently laid out.
What about the shopping center? I mean, is the shopping center able to be built under both scenarios, or in one scenario only?
No, under the existing MLU, the shopping center can be built. Under the proposed scenario, the shopping center can be built.
So the way it is currently now, it can be built under your proposed change.
Smaller version of it,
Small.
much smaller.
Yeah, that's right. There's no, in terms of commercial development, the 130,000 square feet of office is coming out. That cannot be developed under the proposed amendment.
understand?
Yeah.
In other words, the way it was before, it was R5 because of our overall comp plan when we incorporated, which meant that a college could have built on the entire 97 acres as a college. College need is just for 75 acres. So in the sale of property, the assignment was selling 75 to the college. The remaining 22 will be sold as lots of.
But, you know, the funny thing is, when Siskovich, the architect, came in front of us, he said he couldn't give the people in Loxahatchee Groves what they wanted because they didn't have room to design it. And and then in that image, we saw this big cutout in the southeast corner. So on one hand, their own architect was saying, well, we can't do what you guys want because we don't have the room to do what we want. And then you have another Publix show up in the southeast corner. And in 3 miles from that spot, you can drive to 3 other Publixes. I mean, I don't get it.
I think what might be confusing there is this is when we had a 350
In this room,
foot
they
setback.
were in this room.
We had a 350 foot setback
For that, the people wanted a buffer.
from along the northern edge.
Right. Which
With
would
a
go into driving
350
trails and all that.
With a 350 foot buffer, the college and not that room.
No. This was when he was in this room giving a presentation,
Right.
and he was saying, with that cutout, he didn't have room to give the buffer because he had hardly enough room to design his school.
Yeah.
But suddenly added this huge public shopping center.
The shopping center was never offered up to the college. They're asking to subdivide.
Well, they come together as a group, the two of them.
But they're two separate things.
Well, I'm not, that's.
No, I know, but right now, the application that's in front of us that we're discussing has nothing to do with the college. That's the next application.
Oh, were we suddenly supposed to mentally separate it in our head? I mean, come on.
Well,
That's ridiculous.
statutorily, you're supposed to separate
Yeah,
it. You
well,
can
we're not
only
that
comment, well. I think it's important that if we need to discuss this as a board, if we're saying that we don't have a second to the motion based on the application, I as a board member would like to know why. Because that's the way that it was. We all agreed when the comp plan was amended or accepted, however many years ago when we started all this, that's what we wanted, RR5. And that's what they're asking for, with the exception
This is not
of the 22 acres, which we've already approved at a much higher density, which we are now being asked to take 130,000 square feet out, which is more consistent with the rural feel of the community. I would just like to know why the board, based on the information that was provided to us by staff, which was very thorough, thank you, Mr. Fleischman, why?
Let the record show that that Vice Chair Robin Crawford has arrived.
If I may offer,
Cutting.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate the motion on the floor that I do have a second, and my suggestion would be maybe hold the motion for a few minutes and give the applicants a chance to also opine about their reasons, explain their project, and then maybe that motion will be in order.
So maybe we could answer our colleague. Apparently, once the design standards that we have as a town are different than the design standards they have as a state. And they provided us with a nice list of the comparison between the town and the state. So we're not talking about R5, and it's funny you mentioned that, going back to days of old, and we have an incorporator as our chair. When we talk to the people in the town, the understanding was that we wanted a rural community, and that by agreeing to incorporate, we were going to protect ourselves from the county. Well, we seem like this with the county. It's like, what's the difference between us and the county? I mean, we're going to become members of the county. It seems like we're now all baby developers, and everything's coming to us, oh, let's develop this, let's develop that. You see the same cast of characters that I did when I was downtown in 2 different boards there. I mean, it's ridiculous, really. I mean, you look at some of the other universities, FAU or some of these other schools that have very high density on very tiny pieces, who've agreed to do parking garages instead of surface parking. And you go there for, in my case, debates or something with the kids, and you look at all the people that drive in and out of these places. It's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And, you know, it's, you know, semi-prestigious to have a school to serve the western communities, but we're now on the, at the moment, the very far western edge. And we're doing something that's very, very urban, very urban. And it's gonna do nothing but attract more urban. And that should make common sense to pretty much anyone, no matter whether you're for or against this. And I think we really need time to think about this project in relation to what's really happening. You know, what's really being thought about in the end to be built here. And anyone who really thinks about it, especially if they're paid to think about it, would think about it in terms of what's its final form going to be and its final impact. And I think we're really far from that point. So voting for approval of this at this point, I think would be, it certainly wouldn't serve the people who live here. It may serve a greater community if they can drive to the edge to come here. But I don't think it would serve the people that we're sitting here supposedly meaning to serve.
Other comments?
I have another comment.
Keith had something to say.
Yes, I agree with my colleague. The impact on our community on a phased development project is just over 50 years' time. It's going to be so expansive. What is it going to do to our community? I would like to see more detail on the development of the project, sanitary collections, water distributions, the whole ball of wax of school events, how the traffic's going to affect our community. All these items are essential to make a decision on how to go on task with this project. We do not have that information, I believe.
Rob?
Well, going in line with that is the intended use of like the side roads. Is that going to be encouraging in the second half of the year? I don't know if there's anybody in the community to keep all the traffic on the side. I don't know if there's some back.
Yes,
Bring it up a little bit, sorry. Just, you know, my understanding is the intent is that most of the impact will be on Southern. And I'm curious to see how that can be kept that way, because A and B road can be affected with a lot more traffic than intended.
Okay. Grace, you needed to add some more?
Oh, yeah. And I don't know if maybe, Mr. Chair, we ask the town attorney to clarify exactly what it is that we are considering as part of this application. And I know I always kind of sound like the one who's on the other side of the table, but we have policy and procedure in place on what it is that our responsibility is. And what's before us right now, what we're talking about, and we are going to get to talk about college in a little bit. We're not talking about anything but land use. That's all we're talking about. And when we started the process, the land use on this property was RR5. So I'm not sure how on this board you are going to justify not letting it go back to RR5. And that's where I have my frustration. number one. Number two, the portion that's cut out, which is now a less intense project, it's going from 92,000 square feet of commercial low and 130,000 square feet, which would be on the whole thing, which they could do right now, on the whole entire property. They can build that right now, because that's what our council approved. We're taking this massive intensive project, we're making it much smaller, 130,000 plus 92 to 94,000. I just don't know how you're going to point to the comprehensive plan, which is our job to do. You have to know it, read it, and understand it, and say, I'm sorry, Mr. Applicant, we cannot approve your request because it is not consistent with this article or policy or goal of the comprehensive plan. And I don't know that this board is going to be able to do that because this is what it was. And I don't know, maybe Mike, you can, or Mr. Chair, you can ask our attorney to just clarify what it is that we are voting on as part of this application, because I don't think that's clear to this board.
I think everybody really needs to get your head around this thing. What we're doing here tonight is a land use change. Very simple. It's land use. Because we gotta keep things in order. Lawrence, I agree with you, what it may be and what's on the table. But it's simply a very simple decision.
Yeah.
Is we put, excuse me, I have the
Yes,
floor.
sir, yes, sir.
Is that we're looking at taking this back from the MLU, which is a very intense land use for the whole 97 acres. And we're then taking it back, walking it back to RR5 on 75 acres and a commercial low application on 22 acres. Now, as we move forward, so I think, we really just need to get that done. Get that done first, one step at a time, because we can't marry all these things together, because if you do, it's like trying to eat an elephant with one bite. So I'd ask you to hold for another second and let the town attorney chime in here if you could, please.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's important to remember is right now, it is just land use. When I say just, it's the first of many steps or many things that come through development. It's the policy level decision on what that land can be used for, the density. It's not, right now it's MLU. And that has been approved, and there were texts that go with that govern what that development is. They have a right to do right now on that northwest corner of B and Southern. Commercial low, and the residential. Remember the drawing with the 19 or 15 residential kind of estate homes along the north end. That's what there's a right to do now with the land use. Now, that hasn't come through site plan review, that has not come through a rezoning, which is part of the next step. One of the things you're looking at is PUD, which would go in with a multiple land use designation. It's just the land use. So this is what you could do on this property. And what you're being asked tonight is to take that MOU off and put back on RR5, which will say this is what you can do. Anything in the RR5 you can do, and then commercial on the one corner. That doesn't enable them the right to develop it. It won't answer a lot of your questions about traffic, perhaps, because a lot of specifics go into that when you get to the site plan. Commercial will come with a specific site plan. The state colleges has different laws, rules, and regulations that go to state educational facilities. And with the state colleges, I believe it's the Second Amendment, is allowing certain text things to be put into their land use. So that even though you're going to RR5, it's really going to be uniquely suited once that second application goes to their project, to their college. It's not going to, even though you could put 15 homes on it, the text isn't going to let you do that without a further text amendment. That's the purpose of the Second Amendment tonight, is this one, set it up so they can come back with the Second Amendment, which is specific for the college. So if you, remember, you make a recommendation. You make a recommendation to the town council to deny this, you're still going to be asked to look at the second one because you still have to give recommendation. But if you make a recommendation to deny this, your recommendation basically right now is to leave it MLU. that's really a policy decision, is what you want this to be. And Ms. Joyce is correct, you would look to articles or goals, objectives, and policies in the plan to say, we should not make this change because of this certain issue that either staff overlooked or I disagree with them on. But you're here to vet it out. You know, you make these recommendations to the council. So, you know, you're here to talk it out, but really your job tonight is to look at the land use. The site plans, the master plans are coming through, will be coming through later as they go through the review process. This one has to go first because it's large scale. There's a gap between the 2 readings of the ordinance that will take some time for the state agencies to do. So you're seeing this first, and you'll see the site plans and master plans, the rezonings later, if they, you know, for these things.
All right, thank you,
Mr.
Mike.
Chairman.
Yes, Lawrence?
I get the feeling that we're going back to a lower land use designation so that we can come back and end up with a higher, more dense use. That's the feeling I get. I don't know, we'll have to wait and see. I get that three-card Monte kind of feeling going on. So I guess we'll have to see how it sort of plays out. The other comment is, you know, as we deal with each little spot, as you're saying, according to the little rules of each spot, it's like we're dealing with the back of a particular monopoly box that we've been handed. And I think this particular set of rules that we have is very disadvantageous to us if indeed we wish to be a rural community. Now that's my understanding, and that's why we incorporated, and that's my understanding of. However, the actions since that have really shown otherwise, and one can judge people, events, by their actions more than their words. And the pattern so far has not really been good. And, you know, we're going to deal with this little one, and then the next one's little one, and then the next little one, and you're going to be an excellent planner, and you know, it's their game. You're playing their game. They're bringing the little set of rules, and did they match these rules, or did they not meet these standards? And, you know, you're going to lose if you're not interested in a rural community, you're okay. Otherwise, you're going to lose every game. You're going to lose every one of these games, I guarantee you. They're too good. You know.
Mr. Chair, can I respond to that, please?
Grace, would you please respond to that, please?
I agree it's a game, but what's unfortunate is that not everyone knows the rules. And I would highly recommend that you all read the comp plan, because what was approved is what the comp plan allows. They didn't ask, as a matter of fact, the ML, what was approved underneath the original approval was a less dense project than the actual comp plan allowed. And I personally, if we are a rural community, which I believe we are, and in comparison to what's going on everywhere else, you know, in the county, our floor area ratio for some of these things is very small, 0.10. You go someplace else in the county and it's much higher than that. But maybe that's not low enough for us. Maybe it needs to be 0.05. And that's something that I personally have been asking our town council, and most of the members on this board have been asking them to review. But nothing that has been approved to this point has been anything that was not allowed. So your comprehensive plan is allowing this type of density.
I agree.
So it's not that I'm losing, or we're losing, or they're winning. It's what the comp plan allows. It is. I mean, the numbers are there, Mr. Corning. I mean, all you have to do is read it, and it'll tell you exactly what's allowed. And what was approved is a less dense project than what would have been allowed. So, you know, I have to disagree with you on that.
Well, as you know, I've been trying to get rid of this comprehensive plan because it's garbage that we adopted from the county in desperation to get it filed on time. And I've shown it to really great planners, and they agree. And I've been trying to get a charrette going so that we can get this place refocused in a way that tilts the table in our direction and not the other direction. And when you look at the density, when you look at the request from our councilman where they want two stories and that, the other side of the list has 5 stories and it goes on and on as to the differences in what our council people want and what they want. And once you've given them their approval, pretty much they can do whatever they want anyway. For the most part, is my understanding, and we're just here to not have a huge open battle out in the public domain. That's my understanding.
You definitely should
Is that
have a
correct?
huge public battle. I mean, didn't we have a huge public battle when we went up against
Well, the idea is-
Calorie? I just think
Yeah,
that
but
we.
the idea is try to avoid that and try to sit down with the town people in a more civil manner and try to work through this so it just is the best outcome for both sides.
While you're being consistent with the policy, the goals of the comp plan, because legally, that is our job. And if you find this application inconsistent, I personally, as this board member, would like to know what policy you find it inconsistent with, that's all. I mean, I spent hours reviewing the comp plan in this application, and I would hope that you all did the same. So I feel I put enough time into this to say, I want to know why you think it's not consistent with the comp plan specifically. What policy or what goal?
I would like to move this discussion forward, and before we hear the motion again, I'd like to open up to public comment with Bill Lauda. Could stand up and just speak real loud from where you're
I
standing.
normally do that. I normally do that in classes anyway. I've been out of touch a little bit because of things going on at FAU. A couple of things came up tonight I didn't know about. Publix and 5-story buildings. I don't like either of them, period. Okay, last I heard about the college, I was thinking of a 2-story small campus. I'd like to have the campus here. I think it serves the western communities, and we're not really at the entire western edge, like Mr. Horning said. We are in the middle of the western communities, the southern edge of the western communities, if you will. Publix, that was going to be my question, is in the square footage allowed on the commercial, is there going to be a limit on a single building? Because you got a Publix there, like you said, you can go in, there's 3 Publixes. We don't need a Publix out here. That's ridiculous. Is it neighborhood serving? Well, yeah, but, there's a lot of other uses that can be, maybe put an Albertson in, that way it'll fail and we won't have the impact. I like the college, I'm afraid of the traffic, both. I've in jest said several times below the bridge. Perhaps if we had the college and the only entrance or entrances were from Southern, so we didn't have any college entrances on Beach, that may help. I don't know. But would I like to see the FAR reduced? Absolutely. 0.03? I don't know. Because to be a rural community, you need open space. You got to start producing more oxygen than you're using. Like I said, I was out of touch. I'd like to see the full plan as it goes out. But 5-story, that's 2-story is plenty. It's supposed to be a branch campus. It's not supposed to be a main campus. And a Publix is just nah.
Thank you, Bill. Marge?
I didn't put one in.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. You were on 2A. Oh, that's Mrs. Corning, I'm sorry. And my arms are long. I've never seen
That's my
Nina.
signature.
Oh, Nina, okay.
Okay, Nina Corning, E-Road. A couple things. First of all, one of the concerns that I have is as we allow the amendments that we come and simply have the state guidelines tell us what can be done and whatnot. And I really think that a workshop would be extremely helpful. I'm talking about a real workshop where we figure out what we can tolerate and what we cannot tolerate for this college. And also in reference to the legal job that you guys have, it is my understanding, and please correct me, that it is not by right to rescind it, that you do need to ask for permission. And when you are asking for permission, I think you have every right to know why, what is the purpose for RR5, okay? And the purpose for RR5 is not to put houses in and look like the rest of the community, and that is clear. So you have, yes, you have a job to do with that. The other thing that I find a bit misleading is that in the MOU, we made amendments to the comp plan. And in the MOU, we asked for certain things, and that was that we had a certain certain amount of acres. So, for example, the commercial area is no longer MOU because it's under 40 acres. It doesn't fall into what was created for the comp plan. It is a completely new request from you, just as the RR5 is. And these are things that you should consider. It is not automatically given to you by what was created before. Yeah, and in the MOU we had institutional use, and so I would like to know how the MOU that was created would not qualify for a college, even if it wasn't created for that space. Why does it need to rescind to RR5? And I believe potentially the reason why it has to go to RR5 is so that we have less guidelines over what can and cannot be built there. I'd like to get some more information on, and some more contrasting and comparison on these particular issues. Thank you.
Well, as Jim has stated earlier, is that schools are not institutional. They may seem institutional as a means of classifying something, but it's not an institutional use. An institutional use would be something more like an adult living facility or other, institutional nursing home, things like that. Whereas in the RR5 designation, churches, what other institutional would be there, Jim? Churches, schools, daycare, hospital. So I think that we need to really, look at what our function is tonight, on this one particular thing. Because as Lawrence had mentioned earlier, we sat in this room with a workshop and had the college here, and we had Land Design South with their Loxahatchee Commons here, and we vetted this whole thing out. And this isn't, we're done with public comment. We got to the point where we looked at this, at what the college was going to bring, understanding that the college does function under a different building code that we will have to allow, or the college isn't here. Overall, I would much rather have a college sitting on that corner than a vacant Albertsons sitting on that corner, because the college will always be used, and it's something which will serve our western communities. Everybody has always accused Loxahatchee Groves of leave it alone. Just stay like it is, and if you don't like it, move away. But we've also got to realize we have to join the 21st century. The college took a great deal of thought of comparing this site with free 75 acres of Calvary Judge Groves and buying land in Wellington, and they decided on this property because it was centrally located, and the town is friendly towards having that institution here. I think that when we get our heads wrapped around a 5-story and a 3-story and a 2-story, we got to realize that this is 75 acres. When you're looking at this from Southern Boulevard, you probably won't even see the tallest buildings because they're on the interior. The way that I read this master plan and the design guidelines is they're thinking this thing through. We're not going to have low-level log cabins for a college. It's just not going to happen. but we're going to have an institution in Loxahatchee Groves that is going to be able to grow over 50 years. Get your head around it, 50 years. And so I think that, that we need to move forward on this. Go back to the RR5 on the 75, go to the commercial row on the left, and get this ball rolling, because we're just an advisory board. It's really up to the town council to make this final decision. You know, so I think in our job is really to follow the comp plan. Warren brings up the national plan. And that's the point that a lot of us on this board have made, is we really need to look at reviewing the entire comp plan. But we cannot put this project on hold to go through 3 or 4 charrettes for 6 months to look at how the comp plan can be changed. We have an opportunity tonight, later on, with this PUD thing, to take a closer look at what we can do, you know, on the development scale. Grace had mentioned that. Bill Love had mentioned that. You know, 0.03, 0.05. You know, so we can get those sort of things, you know, built into that. But I think, you know, from moving forward, we really need to look at this on its merits, that where we're at, and realize that the arguments that you're very good arguments, and key. But but we're not at a place in time where those arguments are valid arguments to have on the table. We're right now just looking at these land use changes, and going back, because you got to realize that that we're in a just in what the land use is, and then once we get above that, then we can make other decisions. So this is just basically, you know, what the dirt is going to be changed, you know, as.
You made a comment at a council meeting that you would work with our county commissioner for a couple of years promoting this project. Is that, you made some comments like that?
I'm not sure it's a couple of years, but yeah, it came when I was working, it came up on the watch when I was working for Jess.
So are you voting on this issue? Are you recusing on this issue?
I don't see any reason for me to recuse on this issue.
Okay.
Town attorney?
Well, I don't make those ethical calls, but
You don't? Our whole first meeting was an ethical presentation.
great. I know, I updated you all on the rules and regulations, but I can't give safe harbor, so to speak, on rules of ethics. I can give you what I think, and typically there's a conflict when there's a pecuniary or special gain to a person because of that. And if there's no gain or there's no loss, then it's not a conflict typically that would result in a necessity to recuse yourself.
Thank you, Mike. Keith?
Mr. Chairman, can we revisit the motion?
I have 2 public comments here. Can we get past those, and then we'll go
Sure,
back to
you want to give an opportunity to the applicant to do?
Yes. We have a Virginia Standish.
I don't think my comments are appropriate at this time. I think they're for probably the next segment.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't see
I said when I
I didn't
didn't
see an
know
item
the-
number on here.
Yeah, well, if I said when appropriate, I put the topic.
Okay. Let me see here. And so the next one, begins with a B. Yes, pronounce your name for me.
Oh, it passed.
Hmm?
That's okay.
Okay.
Mr. Sheriff, I have just one more comment.
Yeah. Grace?
I was gonna save this comment for the next application, but because it was mentioned several times tonight, I think it's important for everyone in the room to know what our comp plan says. Chapter 8 specifically talks to public schools and facility elements, and currently our comp plan recognizes the fact that the only authority that our municipality has over a public school entity coming in is whether or not it's consistent with the land use. So we already recognize that development standards and design guidelines are a discussion that we can have with the schools. And if it's a post office or if it's any other type of federal entity that comes in, but the bottom line is they're held to a much different standard. The state regulates it, the building code regulates it. I have a copy of the state statute for anyone who's interested. I brought it with me so that you can see this isn't something that you're trying to pull over on us. It's just a state requirement because the standards that the state have are much higher than what some municipality has. But I think it's important to note, again, that we have an interlocal agreement with the school boards of Palm Beach County as well as the county and Loxahatchee Groves to do certain things to encourage development of schools. At the same time, our policy 8B.1-A says that we will expedite review of development proposals to make sure that schools and facilities are consistent with the land uses and compatible with school uses. So we're already recognizing that as a town. So that is almost a moot point at this stage. It's in our comp plan, we recognize it, and I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, would you please give us the motion again, sir?
Sure. I make a motion that we we recommend approval to the council of the application as presented with the findings that it is consistent with the policies and the elements in our comp plan.
Okay, do I hear a second?
You have a second.
Thank you, Keith. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Do we need a roll call vote on this, or do we need a voice vote?
Do roll call.
Okay, roll call.
The alternate does not vote. Sorry about that.
Mark, would you call the roll, or would that be Steve? Steve, okay.
Chair Dennis Lip,
Aye.
Vice Chair Robin Crawford,
Aye.
Committee Member Lawrence Corning,
No.
Committee Member Keith Harris,
Yes.
and Committee Member Grace Joyce.
Yes.
Okay, show that the motion passes 4-1, Lawrence Warren. Okay. All right, moving on to 2B.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 2B is future land use amendment 12-2, which is a text and map amendment incorporating special policy 1.15.4 within the future land use element of the comprehensive plan to govern the future development of the Palm Beach State College campus. The amendments are presented in attachments A1 and A2 of your staff reports. I do want to mention that I enclosed 3 additional attachments in the staff report. And those items are really for illustrative purposes only. The attachments B1, 2, and 3 will become part of the State College's master plan, which will be submitted at a later date and considered for approval by the council as well. They will come back before you. We're going to have an informal discussion on those items tonight under the planning and zoning board meeting when we adjourn the LPA and reconvene later. So I want to make it clear that the items that are being considered by the LPA at this point are just attachments A1 and A2 of the staff report. The attachment A1 illustrates what the future land use map amendment will look like. It's just a reference to special policy 1.15.4, and the text amendment itself will establish the basic guidelines which will govern the future development activities of the college. And it does, the amendment really consists of 3 basic parts. The first part, which is 1.15.4A, cites the land development regulations and regulatory agencies who will exercise development approvals over the State College development. Policy 1.15.4-B requires that the State College prepare a master site plan for submittal to the town. And the town council will consider approval of the master site development plan by resolution at a later date.
Jim, if I could interrupt you there, you know, it just, from the discussion that we had in the previous A2A, I would like for anyone sitting on the board to please ask council staff questions as we're moving through this, so that we're not, we don't have a big discussion over things when we're through with this. So, does anyone have any questions of staff on policy 1.15.4-A? No, everyone good with that one? Okay.
Does
The one
everybody
that-
know what it is?
Basically, you know, putting it in my English is that we can suggest, as far as what we'd like to see the thing look like, is that the actual building codes we have to follow are the ones that are listed in this SREF standards, and they need to follow those codes. So when it comes down to whether or not you're going to use hardy plank or a rock on the outside of the building, or if it's going to be a flat roof or a pointed roof, maybe we can get some input there, so it has more of a rural character, following our rural vista guidelines. So that's how I read that.
If we have a question about a policy, but not for you, for the applicant to answer, at what point should we?
I think this would be the appropriate time to do that, so we don't get things, you know, too disjointed.
Yeah, I would think on this one you want to hear from the applicant.
Yeah.
You know, after the staff finishes, I think you should hear from the applicant because it's specific to the project.
So hold the question for the applicant.
I would suggest let them get up and then ask them at one time to go through staff's presentation, and we'll let the applicant come through. I mean, it's your meeting, but that would be my recommendation.
All right. But make notes when you have your questions, so we can get those done. Yes, Jim, finish off there with 15.4-B.
Okay, 15.4-B is a requirement that the college prepare and submit a master plan to the town for approval. As I said, that would be approved by resolution. The items A through K underneath the policy statement are the items that will be required to be included in the master site development.
All right, everybody good with that? Understand what's going on? Okay.
And then policy 1.15.4C, essentially under state law, the State College has to prepare a campus master plan pursuant to the requirements of Florida statutes. And they have to give each 5 years a 5-year year update and talk about any proposed projects that they have in the future, any changes to the plan, any new phases, whatever. And we have a requirement here that each time that they prepare the master plan, they need to bring it back and discuss the plan with the town.
Okay, so as this 50-year project unfolds, we may be looking forward to getting this done over 10 times. And so we'll be able to have a look at this many times as this project moves forward. Would now be the time to hear from the applicant on this. Yeah, we will hear from the applicant on these 1.15.4A, B, and C.
You're the boss, so if you say it's time here for the applicant, we'll be happy to do so. We are going to try to be a little bit brief. Mr. Fleischman did a fine job, just so y'all know. My name is Brian Seymour. I'm an attorney with Gunster Law Firm. We represent Palm Beach State College on their applications. This is, as Jim and Mike had said, this is sort of stage one, which is the comp plan. Your plan itself, as Ms. Joyce referenced, talks about educational institutions very broadly. What we've done is sort of narrow down so that it's now going to, for Palm Beach State College specifically, have some very specific issues to cover. Make sure that it's clear what we do have to do. We do have to follow state rules. That we are going to make sure that your comp plan, which gives you, and the reason is you get enforcement over that piece of it. So even though we have to do it anyway, this is about you all in your plan getting some ability to say, wait a minute, are you really following the state rules? Are you really following the Water Management District rules? So it's actually narrowing down from what your plan currently has. We're going to talk in a little bit more detail about what master plan is. We're going to go through that later. But that's also a piece that we're providing to you, saying we're going to put these design guidelines in, we're going to put this master plan in, that really is going to guide us over that 50 years. So it's not just a random thing. Now, none of us know, and we'll talk about this, none of us know what's going to happen in 50 years. At the risk of offending somebody, 50 years ago I wasn't even alive. So, right, I knew that would happen. I can see Ms. Jenkins back there, whom I've known for many years, get very angry. I think it's really planner stuff. The legal of how the comp plan fits together is stuff we've worked on. Colleen Walter from Urban Design Kildare Studio, who is a planner in town, she's been here for, well, not here, I was going to talk about years, but after the 50-year-old comment, I'm going to skip all that. But she can talk a little bit about the actual policies, and then we can answer questions about how they fit based on which one of us is appropriate for that.
Thank you, Brian. Good evening, Colleen Walker with Urban Design Kildare Studios, providing planning consultation for Palm Beach State College. I think a couple of comments that were made earlier today is that this application is in response to your comprehensive plan. So at this point in time, we are looking at the comprehensive plan for governance. I think Chairman Limp, the town attorney, made mention that this is one of very many steps that both of these projects are going to have to go through, including the Palm Beach State College application. This is the first step. This is essentially adopting policies into your comprehensive plan that will provide governance and guidance for development of the campus. In the R5 land use designation, public schools are a permitted use. In the AR zoning district, public schools are a permitted use. As Ms. Joyce indicated, Chapter 8 in your comprehensive plan essentially says that schools just have to comply with the comp plan and that is it. These special policies are actually taking that a step further. And what they're saying is that we are going to tell you, the town, how this campus is going to develop. You're going to have the opportunity to have input on the master plan, input on the design guidelines, and you're going to be updated throughout the years as the campus does develop. As was indicated earlier, Palm Beach State College looked at many properties before they selected this one, and they selected it for many reasons. But one of the reasons was that they do like the location. It serves not only the town, but the western communities. With the frontage and the access on Southern Boulevard, it is a very good site. And so they really are working very hard with the town, with town staff, to move this project along so that they can bring it to fruition. They've been looking for a western campus, a campus in the western communities for many, many years. And this is really providing a prime opportunity for that. You have an objective in your comprehensive plan that allows you, or the town council, to adopt special policies that are specific for individual parcels. And the town council already did this when they considered this site last fall and when they considered the adjacent property. When they were both approved as MOUs, the town council also adopted special policies that were specific for those pieces of property. And in this case, we think this is a very excellent opportunity to do the same thing for the college. Although your comprehensive plan addresses public schools and your AR zoning district also addresses public schools and allows them as permitted uses, the Unified Land Development Code does not have any specific regulations for colleges and universities. Does not speak to parking, does not speak to any other governance. So the town would really be in a position of having to amend their Unified Land Development Code or they'd have to consider a whole slew of variances to allow the college, or they can take the approach of adopting the special policies. And again, objective 1.15 recognizes that. It says for those uses that are consistent with the comprehensive plan, like the public schools, the town can consider adopting special policies into the plan. And that is what this application is. It's essentially a supplemental application to the one that you just took action on. And once these policies are adopted, then the discussion can take place on what the master plan looks like and what the design guidelines look like. As Mr. Fleischman indicated, we have 3 special policies that are being proposed. The first one, which is 1.15.4A, what this does is it states what development of the site will be governed by, what documents. There are extensive state regulations that govern educational facilities. The SREF, the State Regulations for Educational Facilities, is probably the primary one. There's also the building code, and specifically section 423 in the building code is only for educational facilities. So there are a lot of state regulations that are already in place. They've been in place for many years. They get updated in this last legislative session. The legislature added section 443 to the building code, yes. And that essentially includes additional requirements for building construction and for construction of facilities. So there are a lot of state regulations that the college has no other choice but to follow these regulations. So in this case, it makes sense to allow those regulations to apply. That being said, the second policy, policy B, would allow the town to have the opportunity to review a master site development plan and design guidelines that would govern development on the site. As was stated earlier, Chapter 8 of your comp plan essentially pretty much says that if the use and the intensity is consistent with the comp plan, it really does not have to follow any other regulations. But in this case, what this policy would do is that it allows for the town to put on a master plan and design guidelines. The third policy is a specific requirement in the SREF. And what that states is that every 5 years, Palm Beach State College is required to do a campus master plan. And this is not the type of master plans that we are used to seeing that are bubble plans. This actually is a very detailed capital improvements plan. What they have to do is analyze the number of students, analyze the programs that they have, look at their existing buildings and facilities. They have to project over the next 5 years what their needs are, how that's going to be funded, and that all gets submitted to the state. And concurrently, that also would get submitted to the town, so that you would have the knowledge of what is being proposed by the college in the next 5 years, and also to make sure that it is consistent with the design guidelines and the master site development plan that would have been adopted by the town council. So it's an additional opportunity for the town to have knowledge of what is being proposed on the campus. Now, this is exactly what happens in the other municipal jurisdictions where the other 4 campuses are. Palm Beach State College has a campus in Lake Worth and unincorporated Palm Beach County, campus in Palm Beach Gardens, campus down in Boca, and a campus in Belle Glade. And all of those campuses essentially follow this same procedure, where they are governed by the state regulations, and the state pretty much does the review of the campus master plans and all of the building plans. In this case, this actually is giving the town of Loxahatchee Groves some extra opportunities as far as guidance of the site by providing for the master site plan and the design guidelines. So we feel that these special policies are appropriate for this site. We've been working with town staff. Mr. Fleischman, Mr. Cutney have done a review of the application. What has been submitted with these policies is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies in the comprehensive plan. And we think that it actually furthers those policies by giving the town the opportunity to review the master plan and the design guidelines for the site. So they are recommending approval, and we hope that we can also get your support for these special policies.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're happy to answer any questions if there aren't.
Grace?
Okay. I've been doing a lot of talking tonight, but I spent the last 3 days doing a lot of research and reading, and I appreciate these special policies that you're putting into place. Quite frankly, they're more to support you than they are the town. Policy 1.154 that talks about, or 1.154A, the development of the property shall be governed only by the following regulations. That just is. That doesn't even have to go in here. That just is the way that it is. But if we are going to put that policy in here, because again, that's providing, there's no value to the town in this policy because they're an entity. We just talked about this. They're gonna develop by these guidelines because they have to. I would like to see, and I'm not sure if it goes in this policy or someplace else, because there's a whole section within the design guidelines of that regulation that talks about green buildings and different designs and special exceptions that you can get as part of development. I think that there are elements that are in the Rural Vista guidelines that would actually comply with the construction requirements that are in the state statute, which I took some time not to read it all, but I did read some of it, and the Florida Building Code for sure. So I'm not sure where that goes, but I believe that it should go somewhere. The other point I wanted to make was the policy 1.15.4-C, where it talks about the 5-year plan and that it would come back to us. I think it's good to point out that seeing that plan, as Ms. Walter mentioned, talks about how many students would be going to the school or how many are currently attending. So that, while it doesn't really give the town an opportunity to review or have input, it does give us a heads up as to whether or not they're going to do an expansion. Because if there aren't enough students, they may not build in 5 years. They may not build in 10 years. Again, while I think the policies are in here, I don't think they bear the teeth that you necessarily say that they do. And I would, again, like to see where we put something in about the Rural Vista guidelines. Objective 1.1 in our comp plan talks about designation of future land use. And it also talks about agricultural land uses and an encouraged limited economic development. And I think the college does that because there's been many studies that prove that while a college can bring economics in the community up, it's mostly by providing better education, getting people trained in better jobs, opportunities for businesses to come to the community because there's a college here who they can then utilize to train their employees in other fields. It doesn't necessarily bring all of that other stuff that maybe big business would. And there's many studies, and you can Google it online, economic development associated with colleges, and you'll see study after study. It brings the value of the community up, not necessarily economic development, and that's consistent with our comp plan. One more policy, 1.18, which I think this is very important. The town shall continue to maintain the rural zoning regulations for areas designated rural residential. And then it lists a bunch of things that we must do. And number 8 says, to include provisions that encourage maximum preservation of open space, the protection of native vegetation and tree canopy in front, rear, side yards, preserving environmental systems, protecting wildlife, and retain the rural character. One of the biggest contentions for some folks in this community are buffers. And I understand that we're talking a 50-year plan, and I think that works in your favor as well as ours. So I would suggest that we need to come to a compromise with the buffer that's at the northern property line. The MLU calls for 300 feet. That may be excessive. 50 feet is not enough. When you start removing what's in between all the natives, you know, what's left? Is there really a visual buffer? And I understand that there's a wall proposed between 4 and 8 feet, but that's a hard surface. I read somewhere that there was some, yeah, it's in here. There's somewhere in this document where it talks about 4 to 8. Go back and look. I would propose that the college seriously consider a compromise of 150 feet, because quite honestly, you don't know where the college is going to be in 10 or 15 or 20 years. You won't know until you do these 5 years analysis. We hope that I shouldn't say we, I hope that you're successful. And the great thing about it is, if you're not, the town gets that protection and the buffer that we want. If you are, you can come back and ask for a reduction in the buffer. And who knows? I surely know we're not going to be here in 30 or 40 years, and our town council will change. And you know, in the past 22 years that I've been here, I never, ever thought I would be driving over asphalt to get to my house, and now I am. So I would really highly recommend that you take that back to the college, and I would ask the board to consider putting that in as part of our recommendation if we choose to move forward with an approval. And that's all I got.
Okay, I guess the question would be is how does that, where would that fit in, and how would that be worded in order to meet with the SBRF guidelines?
Maybe we can respond a little bit. We'll talk a little bit more about the buffer later, but as far as the wheres and the what's going to happen, the design guidelines, that's really what they're for. The design guidelines have the buffers. The design guidelines have the discussion of, and the walls as an option. But the design guidelines also say that you have to replace what you take out in that 50-foot buffer, so it's not going to be whole. So any of the vegetation that comes out has to be replaced with native vegetation. So the exotics come out, new native vegetation comes in, and will ultimately get built up even more than it currently is. You've got a significant buffer there. So you're not going to have the holes per se. But that's all stuff that gets into the guidelines. That's really why this was set up for that. The comp plan is a very broad document that says, generally, here's how we're going to do, and then when we get to the guidelines, we talk about all those details. The comp plan is a very significant document, and it's very difficult to change.
Really? You're telling me that?
I'm not telling you, I'm telling you generally. I'm just sort of generalizing. I happen to just be looking at you when I'm moving along.
I'll look away.
No. So the comprehensive plan is very significant.
You're looking at me?
So we want to make sure that it has what you need to get that ability to have the discussion, the guidelines and the master plan. But if we put those details into the comprehensive plan, it locks things down, very difficult. And the college, and I've said this before, we can't look at this like another developer, like a developer would, because the college isn't a developer. So the college has to look at everything saying, if we're going to go spend $4+ million to buy this land of the public's money, what are we looking at from the long term? If we put something into the comprehensive plan that is going to significantly limit the college, it can't happen. Because the trustees, looking with public money, have to be able to answer the question to the governor and the legislature, much less the rest of the community, why are you doing this? And so we will talk about that with the guidelines. We will go through that. That's the place to have those discussions, whether we agree with them or not. I think that's a place to do that. What we're trying to do here is broadly talk about how to get to that place, I guess.
So you're not a developer, but you cut out 25% of the property for a developer?
No, sir. That's not correct.
Just accidental.
No. Well, let me be very clear about this. You all, the town, have set up an MLU. There was an opportunity for the college to come to the site. In order to do that, the MLU has to go away, but the only piece that stays is the commercial piece that's already there. So the MLU has that commercial piece. We didn't cut anything out. The college looked at it and said, if there's 75 acres that could be available for the college, that's a minimum size that they need. It's actually 74.99 when we round up. In order to do what we need to do, and as you'll see, by the way, it does provide for significant open space, which we'll get to. But we had nothing to do with the commercial pod that's there. That's already there. What we're doing is providing an opportunity for the college to get the rest of the property and put the college campus on there. So no, we had nothing to do with carving anything out.
You're purchasing 75 acres, you're not purchasing 97?
That's correct. The contract is solely for the 74.99, so we'll say 75 plus or minus acres.
All right. Grace, any comment to that?
Well, just wanted to address his comments. I understand how the comp plan works. I am generally not a fan of putting stuff in the comp plan that would restrict the development of the site because it is difficult to change. But I'm telling you, this is not just a, hey, you know, might want to listen to this. I'm telling you that if the community supported the change to the site to commercial because of the buffer, as one of the reasons, to protect the folks that were across the way from Collecting Canal. It's unfortunate our comp plan doesn't address that, but I have a feeling that it will in the future. We're just looking for, I am just looking for, as a resident of this town, the buy-in from the college. I realize that at this point, taking, and maybe it's not 150 feet, that's just the middle. You said 50, it was 350, 150 is in the middle. But I think it needs to be more than 50. And it is an opportunity for you to actually give one to the town and say, you know what, we hear you, we recognize, maybe we can't do 150, we could do 100. But you don't know what the development, the ultimate development of the college is going to be at this time. You don't. You only know the part that's going to be adjacent to Southern Boulevard. So I think this is a unique opportunity to kind of come together and sing Kumbaya and say, yes, we want to be in your community, and we respect the fact that Collecting Canal Road needs to be buffered from commercial, institutional, or any other use that would not normally be there. So I would encourage you to reconsider that. And underneath the design guidelines, I mean, design guidelines are just that, design guidelines. So why not put Rural Vista design guidelines? I mean, to try to comply with the Rural Vista design guidelines is not, I mean, that's, you know, you're saying design guidelines, we're just asking you to be consistent with what we want to see in our town. And you see schools that are built and they're kind of Western style schools. I mean, Pine Jog is a perfect example. If you guys built something that looked like that, a green certified building, that would be beautiful. I don't think anyone in this town would object to that. But I do believe that, you know, stucco and things like that are not something that we want to see. And at this point, the town is a little jittery. We need some assurances that you are on the same page as we are. So I think that just kind of gives us a little bit of a comfort level. I think you should know that.
Yeah, thank you, Grace. Anybody else before we hear public comment? Virginia, I think that we hit on one of your points here, buffers.
Yes, sir. Virginia Standish, excuse me, 15410 North Road. I am speaking specifically to what the guests and Ms. Grace have been discussing, and specifically we're referring to site planning SP 1.3 through SP 2.4, pages 4, 5, and 6. I was shocked to see this included. As has been discussed, we've been very clear. I am a resident of the town. I am a member of the public of Palm Beach County. I welcome the college, but I am insulted that this was even included because this says simply is encouraged, not required. And when I read through this, I see the minimum that may be done on the northern buffer, and I'm referring to buffers and right-of-ways in this plan. This includes the northern end, the right-of-ways down to southern. The minimum that would be done on the northern end, you can have a 2-story building within 250 feet of the property line on the northern end. The minimum, the only thing that would be done there that they could legally do, if was agreed and not monitored, would be a 4-foot shrub or something 4 feet high is the minimum. And yes, there'd be native vegetation, but 3 cabbage palms together can be put in anywhere. So it sounds like we're going for a city look, what's downtown perhaps, or in the middle of the right-of-ways when I drive through West Palm Beach. I do not see anything in here that is required on their end. And I'm looking to the planning, zoning, and the town to protect these right-of-ways and guidelines. Thank you.
You mentioned about, of course, following these, this code that we have, this MLUs, and you mentioned holding them up for 3 to 6 months while we revisit those codes. And I just wanted to cover my own ass here in the sense that for the last year, I have been trying to lobby with you, other members of this group, and the town, and others of those thoughtful members of the public, that we should revisit our documents. And I have the CD of our last meeting where we all chimed in on this, and I'm trying to get that transcribed. We are going to continue being on the short end of the stick. This is just one project, and they're going to, the same folks are going to be rolling these in like bowling balls. And we need to get our act in gear if we're going to represent them the way we told them we were going to represent them when we argued for incorporation. And in a sense of us giving our word as gentlemen of what our intentions and our actions were going to be. So, yes, I understand I'm not a technocrat, so I don't understand the 1Bs and 4Cs, and I don't have the, I'm not going to pull in the wherewithal from my own staff at this point. But the back of this game box is not in our favor. So, off we go.
Thank you, Lawrence. Bill Loudon, public comment?
Bill Loudon, E-Road. Again, I am in favor of the college, but I got a couple of things that scare me. Traffic, the 5-story building, I think of the 3-story building that I'm the supervisor of at FAU. By the time you have a 3-story building, plus air handling, plus other materials, penthouse or whatever, you're up there. You're up to the height of our pines. Our pines are only, 70, 75 feet, maybe 80. 5-story is, you're not going to isolate it in the center. You're not going to take a look at Palms West Hospital. You drop that in the middle of this piece of property, you're going to tell me you wouldn't see it? I don't think so. And is that even 5? Okay, the other thing is, when you're going through the 5-year plans running through the SREF 2007, it said that it comes back to the town for informational purposes. There's no yay or nay in that. Here's what we're going to do, live with it. Okay, the 5-year plan should have a yay or nay by the town, the updates. Okay, it's hard to pass something at the local level that supersedes the state level. We tried to do that, I mentioned that the other night, we tried to do that with the turtles in our canals. I tried to get, when I was on the council, I wanted to pass ordinances that you couldn't take turtles out of our canals. Now, for game freshwater fish commission said, you don't have that power, leave us alone. It's their game. So same thing here. We need to get somehow that when a 5-year update comes through, the town has a, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing? No. Or, yeah, it's okay. But still, and then again, 5-story and traffic. And I keep coming back to, maybe I was kidding, below the bridge, but maybe.
Thank you, Bill. Nina?
Nina Corning, E Road. By the way, it's very uncomfortable to have to stand here and try to remember all the points, and then I've got to speak again in case you forgot one. In the future, I'd very much like it if you guys set something up over here that we can talk properly. First of all, the CL that you have cut out is the exact same size as the buffer that the college right now doesn't want to permit. Just a little side note there. A 5-year revisit of what the college is doing does not mean that you get to say yay or nay. It only means that, oh, we have XYZ amount of students, and they, oh, by the way, happen to come out of the acreage, or so, and oh, well, make plans for us to have the roads to accommodate these students. It does not mean, it does not mean that you can say, no, we don't want to go past the 3 stories. We don't want parking sprawl. We don't want huge athletic fields with tall lights and light pollution and sound pollution and all these other things. And we have to keep control over what comes into this town. So the only way to do it is for us to give some guidelines. May it be by a proper workshop. As I said before, I don't believe the workshop before was a proper workshop as it should be done. And to get these concerns down, to see how things are comparing to our rules right now, and to find some sort of accommodations for the things that we need as a rural town, not as an urban town, not as Burlington, Vermont college town, but as Loxahatchee Groves. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. All right, back to the board. Any of the board comments at this point? Debbie? Keith?
Not at this time.
Robin?
No, I know, but I am going to talk again because I think it's important that the comments are valid. And the policy that they're requesting to put into place about the approval of the master site plan development could address those if they just had a little bit more teeth to them, I think. And that's where maybe we need to put consistency, maybe not comply, but consistency with the Rural Vista guidelines, which talks about the development of the style of the buildings. And I think if that's in there, and if it is in there, and they agree to that, and it's in the comp plan, they can't just not do it. They'd have to come back to us to change the comp plan to remove that, which, I don't think that would happen. But again, I mean, you can hear what we're saying. We're a little bit nervous about this. I like the idea. I think it's great. I think it's wonderful for the community. As I said before, I mean, we would be in a position to get some grant funding that we now cannot currently get because we don't have an institutionalized use. There's a lot of doors that can open for us as a community, but at the same time, we're nervous. And we need some assurance from you guys that this isn't going to be your typical suburban campus.
We have some feedback from the college on this?
I'm just writing a note and then I'll be right there.
Just to add in there, I think that, going back to our workshop that we had in this building, I think that everyone's probably in pretty much the same thought pattern is that we would like to see, the Rural Vista guidelines, held to. And as we get into the master plan and the design guidelines later on, maybe that'll be addressed. But I think having something either in C or in D, that, along with design guidelines, where you have it in B9, is the design guidelines we just mentioned in intention is to, follow the rural vista guidelines as much as possible, or as they can apply. Something in there, so that we have, going back to the community, that we're not going to have, as Dr. Lauda had mentioned, stucco and barrel tile on roofs in Los Angeles Road. Again, this is something that you'll have to bring back to the council, but, I think that in order to get, a nice buy-in tonight, it should be good to hear that.
Well, I can't tell you tonight that we could do that. I just can't, because putting this stuff into the comprehensive plan is a significant issue for the college. We have a lot of difficulty with the rural vista guidelines, by the way. There's a lot you can never comply with because they're directly contradictory to the state regulations. So putting it into your comp plan could create a difficult situation. I also, and this is the difficulty we have in the whole thing, 50 years, no one knows what anything's going to look like. We have tried, and we'll talk about it, we can talk about it in detail, we have tried to do everything we could given the need for flexibility. So yes, there is a minimum of a 50-foot buffer. That does not mean that there will only be a 50-foot buffer. So it is possible, sort of the reverse argument of what Ms. Joyce says, that there could be 150 feet. We just don't know. But we have tried to accommodate that to some degree by, in the design guidelines, and we heard this after the last meeting, in the design guidelines, not just limiting to 2 stories or 35 feet within 250 feet, but also making sure that there's, I believe it's no more than 50% of that area would have any buildings in it whatsoever, so you're not going to have a massive buildings at the north, and you know that. We've tried to figure out as much as we can do to try to accommodate that with flexibility. I want to be careful. Again, I can't say yes or no on any of the comp plan stuff. I can tell you this is what we have approved by the Board of Trustees. And we can't treat this like another private development code. Represent a private developer, you get a lot more opportunities to lock yourself down for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. You can't do that with the college. You can't do that with the state money. So we're trying to put ourselves in the best position we can to accommodate the town and do what the college needs to do. So one of the ways, and yes, the word encouraged is in there, because I can't tell you exactly what's going to happen 25, 35, 45 years from now. But 11 times we have referenced the encouragement, okay? We have referenced either the character of Loxahatchee Groves or the character of the community. Now, if you like one versus the other, we could change those names. But those are in the design 11 times throughout the course of the design guidelines. To incorporate the Rural Vista guidelines, which haven't been adopted, would put the college in a position that they just can't live with relative to the public trust, which is part of the difficulty we have. So we're trying to do what we can. We understand the issues. That's why we came here several times. I think we had a workshop in November and then another one here in March. And we've tried to do everything we can to accommodate. The buffer issue, by the way, was brought up. There is a specific northern buffer section that is different from the other buffers. So you've got 25 feet along B Road and then the western side and along Southern Boulevard. Not 10 feet, not 5 feet, 25 feet minimum. And we didn't put them in as hard, we put them in as minimums. And you have a 50-foot minimum along the north. And that 50-foot minimum along the north is not cabbage palms. That's native vegetation. You've got to keep the story, you've got understory, you've got to plant it so that you don't have holes, as I said. So we've tried to do what we can. We can't tell you the comment that was made about the acreage. I don't control the acreage. We don't control the acreage. With the 75 acres, we can do what we can do. In order for, I would suppose, the property owner to be able to get the value effectively that they have with the MLU, they're not going to give the whole thing to the college. And if they tried, the college couldn't do it anyway because the college doesn't have money. So it's a balancing act that we're trying to work with. It's why we reference the character of the community so many times. It's to remind us, to remind you, and we'll talk a little bit with Jose Merguido from Ziskovich about how we've tried to do that. So for instance, stucco, which keeps coming up. It's not stucco, it specifically says texture, so you're not seeing flat stucco there. So we've got other things in there. We've got hardy, but we're encouraging these things, but I can't know. If the town council, if you recommend this, and the town council says you gotta have a 150-foot buffer and you can't do these things, I don't know that the college could have it. That is certainly a choice that you all can make. I'm being straight with you here. The comprehensive plan pieces that we put forward, we've worked through with the staff, with the president of the college, with the board of trustees. If you want to propose changes, we can certainly try to get back to them, but we really have done what we can to balance the differential that we have between a college and another development type that might be, and what you all are looking for. And when you see our guiding principles, when you see what we've done, hopefully you'll see that we really try to do that. There is some specifics where we can put them in. We do have as much specificity as we can in the guidelines. Those do have to be adopted by the town council. So even if you adopted these policies as is, if the council decided they didn't like the guidelines and we couldn't live with what they wanted, there's still no college campus there. So that's really where we're at. We have written down, we'll sit down, we'll see what we can do as much as possible to deal with this. Hopefully we'll be able to explain some of it in more detail because Mr. McGuido can go through some of it.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Frank, there you are. Okay, Frank Shiola.
Frank Nyla, Boulevard. My question is to the gentleman that was just speaking over there. You're saying that you can't follow the rural Vista guidelines because honestly, you have different building codes for state college campuses, is that correct?
There are certain parts of the Rural Vista guidelines that are prohibited by the state. So we can't have wood in various parts, which is encouraged in the Rural Vista guidelines, for instance. It's one example. So there are certain things we can do and certain things we can't do. I can't tell you what anything, including your Rural Vista guidelines, by the way, are going to look like in 30 years. And I can't tell you where they're going to be inconsistent or consistent with state statutes, which is part of the difficulty. So we're trying to do what we can.
Well, we can agree that everything does change. Nothing stays the same, and then that's just the way that life is, this world is. But at the same time, could we go ahead and, as a community, lobby our legislative delegation to go ahead and make a legislative act that pertains just to this college campus, not college campuses statewide, to go ahead and adopt the Rural Vista guidelines for this campus only. That's not for something, I don't think you're going to want to answer that, but that's just something for our town council and for the people out here, to look at, is to go and seek our legislative delegation and try to put a bill forward that would just address this campus for setbacks in the back part near Collecting Canal for the residents there and for our Rural Vista guidelines. Thank you.
Grace, you have a comment?
Is it possible to put in language that say design guidelines that meet the intent of the Rural Vista guidelines? Because you're right, they were not adopted for whatever reason, but there's a certain look and a feel to what the guidelines are looking for. And like you say, there are some things you can do. I think if we have a comfort level that you can do the things you can do, that you're allowed to do, and that don't, the state statute or building code or any of the other 5 things that you've listed prevented you from doing, I, for one, would feel a little more comfortable. Second point, what if the buffer were put into place for a specific period of time? Say it's 10 years. Because honestly, and I don't know, again, I want the college to be hugely successful. I am in favor of this project, but I do have a couple of points that I think are very important, and I keep sticking it to you. hopefully it will stick
I'm used
to
to it.
you, is if over maybe the first 10 years of the development, that there would be a 150-foot buffer, which could be removed, you know, and maybe you link it back to this report that you have to do every year or every 5 years that says, you know, when the report comes out and it states there's a need for development to take place, and that as part of your master plan is the next building, that maybe through signature of the mayor, you would then be able to reduce down to, and whatever that number is, and I still don't think it's 50, but whatever that number is that something that you think might be acceptable?
At least, I don't know, but I certainly think that's a reasonable way to try to look at it. I'd have to sit down and we'll talk with the facilities people on the timeframes, and certainly we'll talk with the trustees on the time. The signature of the mayor and, you know, what differences there are and how long that time frame is, those are all things to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
We can certainly talk through it. I just don't know what timeframes they're looking at. I do know that the first phase, which is intended to be done at the southern end, which we've shown you, is already they're looking at. It's probably going to be a 10 to 12 year development. So that may well work.
This is a win-win situation.
That may work. So I
Okay.
certainly can bring that back and suggest that. Again, I would put that in the guidelines. We would be very clear, and that's adopted, and we have to comply with that, or you all get to enforce it. Now, Mike's your lawyer, so I'm going to try not to be your lawyer here, but if it's adopted in the design guidelines, and we just, you know, ignore the whole thing, and we just clear cut the whole place, you've got code enforcement powers under that. You could enforce that. You can make us go back to this. So it's not as though we can just go willy-nilly once those guidelines are adopted and do anything. If there's something that's clear in there, we have to do it. So if we put it in the guidelines and say 10 years, that would be 10 years, wherever it happened to be.
10 years should be fine. By then we'll have sold out and ruined the rest of Block Section Grove. It shouldn't matter by then.
Thank you, Lawrence, for your. I'll say, are we ready for a motion here?
I have one other minor point.
Minor point, Rob.
But just to clarify, you had stated that you saw that the Wolf Vista may have some conflict with state. And I don't see anywhere in the guidelines that could possibly happen. It's, now correct me if I'm wrong, there's nothing in the guideline, the Rural Vista, that tells you to use wood or anything. It's merely or strictly suggested for residential scale and design ideas to avoid an institutional one. And so I don't see where it would anything, I don't know, maybe you can point out something that you found that would conflict with state, but it doesn't tell you to use wood. It doesn't tell you you have to use anything. It's more of an objective for achieving a rural look, however you want to do it. So I just wanted to clarify that.
And again, that objective, that same objective is put in there as the objective 11 times. So we do try to do that where we can.
Right. So I just want to clarify that I believe there's nothing in Rural Vista that could conflict with state.
I understand. Thank you. Yeah,
I'm just not feeling comfortable with the fact that number G could say design guidelines that meet the intention of the Rural Vista guidelines. I don't think that's holding you to anything, but it sure as heck has given me a huge comfort level. I mean, intention is interpretive. It gives you a little bit of wiggle room, it gives us a little bit of security. And I'm really not getting why that is a conflict.
I can only give you a legal answer, which is the college would have absolutely no idea whether what they were doing it met the intention, and the only way to determine that is if somebody in 10, 20 years, when we're all gone, didn't like something, they said that wasn't the intention, and now the college is spending money that is the public's money to defend that. And that's, as their lawyer, that's my concern with that. Now, I don't make the final decision, but that is the concern with having that in the comprehensive plan. Because that comp plan is very, very strict by state law. And that's the concern I would have for my client.
I'm not an attorney, but I like to play one at times. And you're stating here that you are going to do these things. Master site plan development, you're going to have design guidelines. And once you're approved, here's your building, you got your building permit, this building has been approved. You've met the intention. You're not gonna go back and change that. So you've already established the palette for the design of the campus with the first building you erect. And if that building meets the intention of the Rural Vista guidelines, then the next ones that you build, as long as they're consistent with the first, you've already established that. So I'm not buying that one.
I understand. I can only tell you, as a lawyer, I got the concern. I'm litigating too much, I guess.
Okay.
Okay, Greg, you want to formulate a motion?
Oh, my goodness. Now, just for clarification, these are just, this application is just to amend the comp plan to add these 3 new policies.
Yes, it's essentially attachment A1, A2.
Okay. I have to add an amendment, and I realize it's a recommendation. I know you guys realize it's a recommendation, but I'd like to think that our recommendations do hold some weight. So with that, I would make a recommendation to approve the application to the future land use text, to amend the text to include 3 new policies with the addition under policy 1.154-B, G, design guidelines to meet the intention of the Rural Vista design guidelines, kind of redundant. I'm not really sure how to formulate the language for the buffer, but again, I feel very strongly that there's a way to put something in here that protects us and at the same time will provide you an out when development does occur. Maybe it's under policy 1.154-C that says, shall be submitted to the town of Waxahachie Groves for informational purposes, at which time the reduction of the 150-foot landscape buffer on the northern boundary may be reduced with the signature of the mayor or something. I'm not sure, Mike, if that's...
Well, I don't know if you want to have, the mayor probably won't do anything without taking it to council.
Yeah, that would be,
You know,
okay.
with council approval.
I think that's okay. With council approval.
you want to try to summarize that?
Got that?
I was thinking in writing, and that means you don't do either one well.
While you're doing that, Mr. Chair, I just want to let you know that number 2, we really should have a few minutes ago. I don't know if you saw it.
All right. Thank you. Just let the record show that Debbie Castellone has left the building.
Well, the 2 proposed amendments, 4-B, subparagraph G, the design guidelines to meet the intentions of the Rural Vista guidelines. And the second proposed amendment is 4-C to add the phrase "at which time reduction of the 150-foot northern buffer may be approved by town council." So they can come every 5 years for that.
And I would encourage you to come up with something better, if you think, to get a comfort level, but
I mean, there's nothing in here that says it's 150 foot and that can be reduced.
well,
It's
let's add
implied
something
there,
then,
but-
shall we? Well, we can change J.
Okay, well, you have to tell us, I'm just trying to help them.
I was thinking about that. So J, we can do a change to J where it addresses the screening along the northern boundary. We could say a detail of the proposed 150-foot buffer for screening along the northern boundary, including addressing removal of the invasive vegetation and replanting.
Yeah, I mean,
Simple.
again, this is just to make these your recommendation
I
or your
understand
amendments
that.
flow, right?
I understand that.
Okay. Then that probably would work, because I mean, even without, there's an implication of what you said. If the intent of your amendment is to say, right now there's 150,
Mm-hmm.
and then which can be reduced in 5-year increments.
Yes.
That's the way I understood your
Yes.
your motion. So you would want to have in there somewhere to confirm that it starts at 150, and that would be where probably we would do it.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's my understanding of the motion.
That is correct.
Does everyone sitting here at the board understand what the intent of the motion is? Okay. All right.
But,
Is there a second?
well,
Or do you want to read it first?
well, no, I just wanted to.
Basically, so we all understand that we'll be approving the amendments as stated, A1, A2, with two amendments on 1.154B sub G, that the rural vista guidelines will,
The intent.
design guidelines is the attempt to meet the intention of the rural vista guidelines. And also on 1.15.4A, B, subparent J, subparent J, right, J, is the, we'll stick in there 150-foot buffer on the northern boundary.
So it would say that the proposed 150 foot buffer.
Yeah. And then in 1.154-C is on those 5-year increments, that 150-foot buffer can be reduced upon consent of the town council.
I don't get
No, yeah, that's, I understand it, you know?
All right, is there a second on that?
No second.
Okay, Keith. Any further discussion? Can we have a roll call vote, please?
This is to recommend approval.
Yeah.
Subject to those amendments.
Right. Which the town council will have.
Or including those amendments.
Which the town council will either approve or disapprove.
do you want to, anything?
Here's what I can tell you. If that's what happens, there's no college. The way the trustees have explained it, that's the death of the college. And that's a choice. I'm just
I
being
understand
honest.
that, but we're giving you an opportunity to give us an alternative, and you didn't, so.
Well, I
mean,
can't speak for the trustees except what they've told me, which is they can't agree to more than a 50-foot buffer. Can we maybe say that we won't get to that area, that we won't get past the north, we won't get within 200 feet for 10 years? Sure. But if you tell the college, again, they're looking at this as though the next board of trustees and the board after that and the board after that may have to go to the mayor and the town council and say, can we now do what we need to do? Without knowing that, they can't put $4.5 million of public money into this.
That's not my intention. My intention is, and this is based on the documentation that you guys have to do every 5 years that said there is a need to build that building. You've established the need, the town council signs off on the need to build the building, but until you provide us with that information or an alternative, I
Well,
mean,
I could tell you, I could recommend to them that a time frame. Once we have to go and get a signature in order to do it, they can't put $4.5 million of public money without knowing, and they can't know, and that's their problem. So they will not do that based on the way they've got to look at this. And look, I understand where you all are coming from, and I'm not saying you should or shouldn't do what you want to do. I'm just telling you from the trustee's perspective. They've got public money to put $4+ million down and say, we need another approval on this buffer because they can't build the campus that's intended because the way they build campuses, where most of their open space is in turn. They didn't want a 50-foot buffer, to be honest with you, but we figured out we could do this with a 50-foot buffer. If you say you have to have 150 feet, and when you prove to us that you now want to go down to some other number, and suggesting it may be more than 50 feet, but even if you go down to 50, what happens when the town council, even though we've thought we've proved it, says, you know what, we don't think that we want that to happen. Now the college, after putting all this money in, doesn't have the assurances. That's the concern that they've got, and that's why we're trying to do this in the best way possible.
okay, so then what's the alternative?
I think the only alternative that I could recommend to them is that we put that 10-year time frame, and that after 10 years, that the college, or within that first 10 years, the college will not develop any property within 250 feet, we'll give you the extra there, of the northern property boundary. And then once the time frame runs, we can do that. I'd still, by the way, rather have that in the guidelines,
I know you would.
because, you know,
I know.
bottom line is a problem. So we can work through that with the guidelines, but and we put some other things in the guidelines to that effect to try to deal with the buffer issue. But if we want to talk about a 10-year time frame, I could recommend that. I cannot, they're just not going to have to come back as the problem. But a hard 10, I think maybe we could talk to them about.
Thank you. I think that it really, this is the decision. Is their way or the highway? Am I interpreting that right?
Let me, it's
Sure.
about Brian to speak. I'm Dick Becker, I'm the Vice President at College. The board chose to come to this property, as was discussed times, with opportunities to go to other properties that were less expensive. We've already given up 3 properties same size to pay $4.5 million for this property. We don't know what our building needs are, but we know that our board and the administration feels that we need the absolute maximum flexibility that can be built in. I don't think there would be any problem with going to our board and saying for 10 years we would leave the north boundary at 150 feet, 250 feet, but to then make it set on an action that has to take place from something that we don't control. Our discussions are over. I mean, it's not a threat. We cannot do that.
Yeah, I understand.
When this project first showed up, there was no commercial in it.
We have no commercial.
Yeah.
The college, here's
When
the,
it first showed up, there was no commercial on this whole square. I mean, that would have given you the design flexibility.
We came in with a commercial property already there. We did
Right.
not come in
Right.
first.
right, the commercial property is set already. If you did absolutely nothing, the commercial property is there, right, Joe Bob? Right, so that's there. So it wasn't an option to take out the commercial property. That is what it is. So we, as I said earlier, it's not something we did. It was already pre-approved. And so there was 75 acres roughly that we were trying to accomplish because that's a minimum size that the college needs for its plans over the long term based on its history. And there is a lot of history with the college and how they work with their communities. If you look at the Palm Beach Gardens campus, which is the one we use as an example, because that's the philosophy that you've got, it was just complete woods. Pretty much complete woods. And it still is significant woods. You still see the lakes around the outside. That's the ideal. again, 50 years is a long time. So there's a history with the college that we have to rely on, you know, as part of the communities that it's been in. Because Palm Beach State College is designed for its communities that it's in. It's not FAU. It is not UF. It is not University of Miami. It is a very different animal. So, you know, we're doing the best we can with it. I think the tenure thing can work, Ms. Joyce. You know, if we put the hard stop, I think, as Mr. Becker said, I think we can get that. It gives you some comfort.
I was looking for that before I made the motion. You know, I gave you the opportunity a couple times to, and you said, I don't know, maybe.
Well, it was then I was unclear and I apologize.
Okay.
Because I was talking more about the second half, not the hard stop time.
Public comment, Mr. Simon?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of points I'd like to make, and I really prefer not to speak on it. There's been a comment made several times tonight, and it's incorrect, that the school carved out 22 acres for a shopping center. That's simply incorrect. We had a contract for that 22 acres nearly a year ago, maybe 9 months before we even spoke to the school. The school looked at these 75 acres we had remaining. And we went through months and months of the school, looking at a lot of other sites, asking a lot of questions. It was incredible around due diligence. But for anyone to say today, well, you just carved out for the shopping center, is totally incorrect and misleading. And I only ask that whoever keeps doing that, stop. The second thing I'd like to say is that the buffering has been a major issue, even when we presented it, and someone from the town said, we're going to insist on a 300-foot buffer. Why? Because that's what we insist on. Why? That's what we insist on. But if you buy 35 acres, 3 streets down, twice as much land as you're giving up here, then we'll let you do that and have all the buffer you want. We'll have as little as you want. So it wasn't buffering, it's extortion. The buffering is to protect the people to the north, as I understand, and I've been in this business 55 years. Buffering is to protect the people across the way. How buying 35 acres on Road F instead of Road B would solve that is beyond my comprehension. The design the school has come up with, I think, is beautiful. The buffer of 50 feet is only about 20% of the north boundary. It's much deeper because there are some wetlands and they're going to build around those and preserve the wetlands. And if you would just take an hour and drive to PGA and look at the EC campus, which was built by the school, Palm Beach State College, without any local regulation. They did it on their own. There's so much green space there and buffering, you can hardly see the buildings, even as tall ones. The skyscraper, 5 stories. It's not a skyscraper. I mean, please. I built a project in Delray, and while I was building, there was a petition to shut us down because we were building a skyscraper, 4 stories. And they said, well, 4 stories, 8 feet, that's 32 feet. Why do you have to go higher than 32 feet? Well, there's some stuff above the ceiling, like air conditioning ducts and plumbing and all. And then when we had an opening party, the driver of the petition said, when are you going to build the skyscraper? I said, that's what you were opposed to. He said, oh, please, I'm so sorry. People get hyperbolic and exaggerating, but the plan these people have, if it was my land, it is my land. I would kiss their foot. If I was a resident here and I knew of all the possibilities that may come down the road, as Mr. Corning infers, if I had to look at what might happen on the road, I would say thank you, Palm Beach State College, because the work they're going to do here and the landscaping they're going to do and the care of design is beyond what you could ever expect. You're going to be very, very happy with what they're planning. And I just think you need to step back and think about it and not get irrational and say things that are totally incorrect.
Okay, one last public comment on this, Nina.
Nina Corning, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Greenway Committee. We are in charge of greenways, equestrian trails, water, roads, etc. When you did your due diligence, we, during that time, had a meeting, a public meeting on Okeechobee Road in the Presbyterian Church, when the MOU proposal came in front of the town. Back then, it was already clarified that we wanted a 300-foot buffer, and that was going to be a buffer not only to protect the residents on the other side, but also to give us a linear park, riding trails, preservation for water, those type of things. So if you truly did your due diligence, then when you decided to purchase the amount of land that you are now talking about, the 75, not the entire, with the 20 acres of CL, then you knew that that was the desire of the town back then. So it is very important for the Greenway Committee to have connectivity. We have an extremely difficult time with connectivity going east and west, and that is an important part for us. So I would like you to consider that when you are trying to reduce the buffer to the bare minimum, in which you do not only have to buffer these higher buildings from the residents, but you also have to allow for the water control to maintenance the canal and for the greenways to pass through. At that point, a very reduced buffer may not seem so much anymore. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I answer the question on the due diligence, Mr. Lynn?
Sure.
Because I want to be clear. First of all, we haven't closed, and there's part of that. This is all part of the due diligence, and I wasn't aware the Greenway Committee met, so I don't know what happened or what they've said about this project. But what I can tell you is we had that workshop in November, and the critical issue that we raised was that buffer. And we were very clear about what the issues were. We got the feedback. That's where the 50 feet came up. We had a second workshop last month, which is where we then came up with the additional piece on the limitation on the percentage of buildings. We put the height restriction zone in. Now we're hearing, and I think we can come to the 10-year hard stop. For the first 10 years, we won't go within 250 feet, which we'd rather put in the design guidelines. I have to say that's where we should put it, not in the comp plan. And so that was all part of the diligence. Had we had those workshops, and your town council, and after hearing from everybody, said 300 or bust, we wouldn't be here. So that, just for clarification at that point.
So can I ask the applicant a question?
I should have just shut up when I was good.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Policy 1.15.4C talks about the campus master plan.
Yes.
And that after it's finished, you're going to, since give her a copy of the county receipt file.
You're talking the 5-year? Yes. Yes.
Is it, has it ever been done where representatives of the town actually sat and participated, even if it was on an informal basis, in the preparation of that document, so that some of the town's concerns might be brought up during the preparation of the plan and may be addressed?
You're allowed to make comments, basically, on the...
Whether it's been done, I don't think it's actually been done historically. But if you want an opportunity for input, again, I'm being careful. I don't want this in the comprehensive plan, but we can work it in somewhere, or I guess if it is in the comp plan, that prior to the submission of that plan, that the college will, receive input from the town of Loxahatchee Groves. Dick, I don't want to speak for you.
That's fine.
But we certainly can say that you all can have input into that plan. That's something we can put in. And I guess that may be the place to put it. Damn, I don't want to agree to a comment.
Present the plan
I know
prior
you
to
don't.
submission.
Get over it.
That's not my choice. I can only
Just give
represent.
the town an opportunity to.
For input.
During the preparation.
Based on the addition of,
Can be addressed that way.
based on the addition of Mr. Fleischman's suggestion, which I thought was brilliant, and,
Mark that down.
yeah. No, I'm a Fleischman fan,
There's
so.
tape. There's tape.
And our comp plan hater attorney over here, who finally agreed to give us a time frame, I would agree to amend my
Was there
motion.
even a second on your motion?
Oh, I did.
There was, okay, so do you wanna, if you don't wanna move forward on that, do you wanna offer to rescind it?
Yes, I
And offer
do.
new, then if you wanna do that, can be a second, or we'll agree to that, and you can start over?
I would like to rescind my original motion.
Okay. And then seconder agrees, correct? Okay. And you want a substitute motion?
And I want a substitute motion. I still want to keep the design guidelines meeting the intention. And then we would change J to state, and a detail of the proposed 250-foot buffer, yada, 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 which
He wants to know how you spell yada, yada, yada.
he's an attorney, he knows. Can I ask a question, and I know you're gonna show us the site plan, and we're gonna look at it in a little bit, but if you were to include, because I remember that there was the wetlands that were at the northern part, what was the furthest distance of the buffer? I mean, the minimum at one point was 50, but there was more elsewhere?
There was never any other buffer that was
Well-
shown elsewhere. It was,
So that wetland was included in the 50-foot?
it comes out, but it wasn't part of the buffer. It just happens to be, part of it's in and part of it's out.
Okay, all right.
If you did 250 feet, that wetland would actually still be completely in that 250 feet.
No, I'm just trying to get a comfort level of if we do reduce it in 10 years, and 10 years would be from the CO of the first building. And I think we need to, Mike, if we could define that, because that's not like a shed. I
Well,
mean,
for a
like,
classroom building.
okay, there you go, that's what I'm talking about, a classroom building. I know how you developers are. People think I'm one, but I'm not.
They don't get COs.
Oh,
You have to get COs.
yeah, because you,
Oh, you've got the Florida Building Code has
That's
an
right.
inspector. Sorry,
it's okay,
I got bad information.
yeah, yeah,
All right, sorry.
it's okay. Where the buffer could be reduced to, and I would look to the council to come up with that number, our board here.
Can I suggest maybe how you would maybe add at the end of that J, and say, provided for the initial 10-year period after the initial CO for a classroom building, the buffer along the north shall be no less than 250 feet. That way, if you're gonna leave the minimum there, it can be part of design guidelines, but this will say that for the first 10 years, that northern buffer cannot be less than 250.
Okay,
I mean, so it would say a detailed proposed buffer for screening along the northern boundary, including addressing removal of invasive vegetation and replanting, provided for the initial 10-year period subsequent, or for the 10-year period subsequent to the initial CO. That northern buffer shall be no less than 250 feet.
I'm okay with that.
Does that make sense, Brian?
I
mean, at least.
The language makes sense, but I can't say I agree to it. But I get what you're saying.
But isn't that's the concept that you think?
Oh,
you
yeah,
could recommend?
yes.
Right, that
Yeah.
for the 2 years after the initial CO.
10. 10.
10, I know, I said 2, I apologize. It would be 252.
Can I just take 1 second, because the CO language was a little different, I want to check with Mr. Becker on something.
Then you get to whatever's in the design guidelines. Whatever they decide to do. Who's calling it?
Do you need to put a minimum in there?
No,
You can never exceed?
well, let's talk, we'll talk about that. Let me get to what they're doing first.
Okay.
Okay, let me see.
All right, so we would, just because we don't know the time frame to get that CO, if it takes 3 years before we actually get the first CO, we're now 13 years out
Exactly.
before we can do that. I don't know what the board would say to that, because they don't have that as a hard number. I can propose that, I think that it's something they might do. All I can tell you is that we'll talk to them about that. I'm confident about 10 years from the approval of the design guidelines and master plan. I'm not as confident about 10 years from the first building, but we certainly will see what we can do.
Okay, let me ask a question about that then, because I'm not comfortable with after the adoption of the master plan, because it could take, in reality, 3 years to build it. And the goal is to try to protect that northern boundary as long as we can from the development that's going to take place. So if there is no development, we're not protecting it from anything. So if you come up with your master plan and your first building goes in, will you put another building in before your 5-year review?
Possibly.
Possibly, okay. No, I don't think we should change that. I think.
We'll bring, I mean, that's going to be a
Yeah, 'cause you're not
recommendation, and
gonna
we'll bring
get-
it back.
Yeah, you're not gonna get that far in 13
It's-
years. Yeah.
Kirk?
Kirk Stetson, I'm the facilities planning manager at the college.
Oh, you're the guy.
Just
And a licensed architect.
Just to clarify something, as soon as we close on the property, we'll have the opportunity to approach the state with the first enrollment projections for the next 5 years. So let's just take it in a best case scenario. We close in October, and I'm gonna be the guy that prepares the first 5-year plan. We'll have to submit that to our board of trustees along with a master site plan for the first 5 years. So that's the point that you'll get to see how many buildings we're proposing for the next 5 years if they're funded by the state.
Right.
Which is a big if,
I understand.
okay?
I personally think that the CO is a bit too high of a standard.
I don't.
There's a difference of opinion,
Yeah.
that's fine.
I mean, the point of the buffer is to protect the residents or the neighborhood from the construction of the buildings. But if they're not there, it's existing, it's just as it is now. So we're telling the community, we recognize your concern, the buildings are going in, and for 10 years, while the buildings are in and done and occupied, and not only that, but it may not be as bad as everyone thinks it's going to be, but it gives them at least that little bit of, hey, we hear what you're saying, and we're gonna do what we can to get you comfortable with this. So, and nobody has to sign off on it.
Okay, is there a second on this motion? Everybody understand what the motion is?
One more, two questions. First of all, design guidelines, the same thing you had the first one,
Yeah.
World Vista. Second is language that says for the 10-year period after the initial CO for a classroom, minimum 250.
Right.
If you want to add in something about Mr. Fleischman's recommendation about
Yeah, they agree.
participation and input in the preparation of the 5-year plan prior to submission to, I guess it gets submitted to the state board.
Yes.
Who gets that?
Yes.
Department of Education.
Okay.
Yeah, because they agreed to that, that was great.
That would be in 1.15.4.
It would be like a sentence at the end of 4C.
I have a question. Is there a permanent minimum?
Well, no, that was gonna be the next thing I was gonna say. What was talked about was that the permanent minimum, what Mr. Seymour said.
Well, if they can forget your name, you can forget
Um,
mine.
was that the minimum would be part of those guidelines that you will see.
Which it is.
And what is it?
It is 50 feet at a minimum.
So you're providing in this, the compromise is 250 for the first 10 years.
13.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
We
From the
got you.
CO,
Well,
I mean,
get
that's
cracking.
right here.
We got, we'll send that
But
quote
I
to the
want
governor.
There you go,
but
I'll
I-
call him.
All I'm trying to do is clarify your motion. I'm not trying to.
No, that is
advocate
correct.
Or anything else. I want you to understand what it is. That's okay. What you will be considering, possibly discussing, ultimately voting on is just the motion. So it's clear when it goes to town council what you did and what your recommendation was. That's all I'm trying to do.
Yes. That is the intention
Is
of
that
my
your motion?
Correct.
Okay. So it's,
All right, is there a second? Keith, are you a second in this one?
I will defer.
Okay. Rob, second this one? Okay. Lawrence? Second? Okay. So this motion fails for lack of a second. Keith, would you have a motion?
Only situation is the buffer. It's a deal breaker. A buffer is designed to shield one party from another. If the buffer for 10 years is going to be excessive and then go back to the original, why go through the hoopla of coming to the 10-year end, I would like to make a motion to amend the previous one to where the 10-year break is eliminated. Help me with the language.
would that mean, I'm just trying, your intent would be that instead of having a 10-year, it would just be 250 buffer?
No, we go with the 50. That's originally
Be done with it.
going to be done with.
In other words,
There's
just-
no
just-
benefit.
in other words, just go
Just
back
take
to-
out the whole buffer.
So,
Right.
so
So
then,
take out the whole buffer, because what we have here is a requirement of a detailed buffer in,
so is it, I'm just trying
in
to.
1.15.4, that the detailed buffer, that information is going to be, have to be accepted and approved prior to the issuance of the building permit. If it is not acceptable, then we have an issue then. Why complicate it by making a staged reduction of a buffer? Let's go with the original buffer as it was intended, and let the review of the permit application take care of it.
So would you would, I just want to make sure I get it. You would have the last motion, but only with the design guidelines with the Rural Vista and of the college to allow participation of the town and forget any change to the buffer
That's
language.
correct.
And leave that for the second phase.
That is correct.
Okay, so your second motion would be, okay, so if you're making that motion, just for the record, what I read that motion to be is amending 1.15.4 B as in boy, G, to say to amend to the Rural Vista guidelines, which is the same thing in the first two motions, correct?
Exactly.
And then the second part would be to amend policy 1-1.15.4-C to add the sentence about an opportunity for the town to participate and
Yes.
input in before submission
Yes.
to the Department of Education.
Yes.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second. Okay, the second by Rob. Okay. I'm gonna ask them for a vote. I think we had enough discussion.
I just want to make one more comment, because I haven't said enough already. I'm just not sure why you would give something up that they're willing to give us. I don't get it, but I've said it.
Okay, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Chair Dennis Lipp,
Aye.
Vice Chair Robin Crawford,
Yes.
Committee Member Lawrence Corning, Committee Member Keith Harris,
Yes.
Committee Member Grace Joyce.
No.
Motion passes 3-2 with Grace and Lawrence voting no. Okay. Now, is this what we're gonna do, the MLU?
The PUD.
The PUD? Okay, it's 9:45. Let's try to wrap this thing up by 10.
We take this to five, like maybe just
5-minute break?
Maybe a 3-minute break.
All right.
One of the personal privilege.
All right.
Stays because they want to see the rest of the meeting. Yeah, we'll see what happens when it goes. I have to go to the bathroom. Are you going to be here? Okay. It's been about 45 minutes. I've been hoping someone would do this. Kirk Stetson.
Hey, Val, who's this young guy that's following you? God, it's been years since I've seen you.
I never saw him like that.
Yes, one other time.
Jim.
So what is your interest in being here this evening? Are you a resident or are you just? Or the open? And that's that first story, 5 stories. Is the first building a 5-story one?
Really, remember from the last time I heard about it. I don't think if it wasn't the first one, it wasn't very hard.
Yeah, because I think the 5-story building would be set back far enough that you wouldn't even see it from the road.
If it would be true that there was stuff from
They were showing me the commercial ended. Northwest of that point. There, here, or
I was looking at this idea of music campus for a little while, but you barely see it.
I know. I have struggled to find the buildings when I was up there. I mean, it's sort of,
No, we're just going.
made me think I was in. There are a couple other ones.
Yes, that one.
Actually, well, I make lots of money out of zoning and litigation.
I'm on favor. Now,
They've already kind of already worked.
Another bridge, put it over there.
we don't want the because there's only one the farmers across the way does not connect to anyone. On the east side, bear the whole.
Let's try to get back together. It's been 5 minutes. Come on. We got 10 minutes to get the meeting over. All in favor, say
They would put extensions out over the but they're long. They were 200 inches long. Is that what you call this?
Mr. Attorney, we just have like 5 waters if they need to be repaid. I don't know what these guys are We just need a big charitable donation to the town. From what I understand, by the way, that means that one of our enforcement gets to kill all the one. That's the whole one sponsorship, right? I'm sorry. Okay, what was the joint?
The one that joined with the labor. Yeah, we were.
I forgot what we named it. Central Park.
Central Park Beach. That's one of the pillars that we are trying to address in base on creating workforce for economic development. So that's key. The effort that we are trying to implement.
So now give input as to what you're hearing.
Okay, we're going to get this back on point here. All right, so we've muddled our way through about 25% of this meeting. And I discussed with the town staff that we will table the ULBC discussion on the PUD for maybe a special meeting that town staff will work out, possibly the 26th of April. because this will take probably an entire meeting. But we'll wait for town staff to get back to us on that. And Mr. Fleischman has indicated that he would like to put some finishing touches on it, so it's more complete. So that leaves us with the master site plan, design guidelines, and but that's adjourning this meeting and starting the next section. Would that be correct, Mark? Okay. So,
So you need a motion to adjourn the OPA portion and then to reopen the planning and zoning.
all right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the LPA section.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion, is there a second? All in favor, all opposed, so the LPA section of the meeting is now closed. And we're now moving on to the planning and zoning board, is that right? We have a call to order, approval of agenda, and appointment of chair and vice chair. Are we going to take it in that order? Yeah, I don't see how that works. I thought we were doing the master plan or design guidelines as part of the
Mr. Chair,
LPA.
the way that the meeting was set up was to have the first part of the LPA and second part as the board. You can't have one meeting and have it in different parts. This was set up because this was the first time you were doing it and had a chance to confer with you the way you prefer it. So what you can do, it's up to you if you want to reorder this portion to allow the right to college to do its thing. Then you can go back to the chair, vice chair minutes. You should still do the roll call. And it's up to you whether you want to approve the agenda or not.
All right, well, without objection, we will reorder the agenda so that we can get the good people in the college done so they can be on their way, and then we can take care of the housekeeping chores after that. Without objection, we'll reorder. Okay, Steve, you can make a roll call.
Chair Dennis Lip,
Here.
Vice Chair Robin Crawford,
Here.
Committee Member Lawrence Corning, Committee Member Keith Harris,
Here.
Committee Member Grace Joyce.
Here.
Also Town Manager Mark Cutney, Town Assistant Stephen Hainline, Town Planner Jim Fleshman, and Town Attorney Mike Cirillo, as well as the Town Engineer Patrick Figueroa.
All here. We're all here. So to speak.
I'll go ahead and take that personally.
All right. Looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. We've done a lot of this. I had a whole little intro for you that is now completely out the window because we've gone over most of that. The point to be made and what we want to do here is take you through the way we've thought about this and how we came up with the master site development plan, what it does show, what it doesn't, and then also the design guidelines that will take us through the ultimate development of the property over the entire course. Instead of going through some of the detail that I was going to go through, I think in the interest of time, and because we do have already a significant amount of feedback, I'd like to turn it over to the lead project architect from Ziskovich, Jose Merguido. Jose is the vice president and head of the educational facilities division with Ziskovich. He'll take you actually through the plan, the concepts, how we got to where we were, and then also through the design guidelines and some of the things that you'll see in there. Obviously, we'll then be available for questions and to try to take what we can.
Great. And as Mr. Seymour mentioned, a lot of the stuff we've already touched on, but I'll take you through our thought process. And we definitely understand how important this site is. I understand how personal it is, and that is something that we take to heart. We've been studying the site for a while, and at some of the workshops that we've had, my partner Bernard was here, and he's written his book on how to do planning, and this is the quote. We look what's unique and authentic about a community and try and design the plan around that. And that was the guiding principle that was around Pine Jaw. We were also the architects of Pine Jaw. And the reason that is a national example of sustainable design, high-quality educational learning environment is because you find what has value in a piece of land, in a community, and you develop that plan around that. And that's what we try to do in this site. From the cypress domes, the cypress knees, to the edges around the project, those are the guiding principles that you'll find in the environment. And it's not something that we're bringing in here. We're delighted at the fact that the college practices this. Incidentally, Pine Jaw was designed under the state regulations, SREC. It did not have overlay guidelines on it, so you can achieve a high-quality educational environment within the confines of SREC, a national model, I'll say. And that's exactly what happened here at Palm Beach Gardens. This is a campus that was carved out of a beautiful green site that still maintained the value of the site, was able to balance the community needs, the built environment, as well as have picture postcard settings. This is a campus that has many of the same guidelines we have. The buildings are clustered around the center. They're dense buildings, but what it does is it allows you to have a nice green ring around that. That's then isolated with parking and loop roads around that. An educational environment around the center, connected by walkways. That's generally what we're doing in these guidelines. That's the intent. That's what we're shooting for in this. And you can still achieve buildings that are 3-4 stories high within that. You never know they're there because there's enough distance. You know, this site has about half a mile from east to west. There's a very, very large amount of space that forgives, if you will, the density. One of the things that you do in this density, if you densify the site, you then have more open space, which is what happens over here. If these buildings were squashed down, they would be all up against the edge. So it's important to preserve what has value, the beautiful landscape, by being able to plan it in such a way to maintain the open space and create those areas. And this is the objective. This is not a postcard. This is, in fact, the retention ponds. This is part of a buffer. This is another buffer around that particular site. So this is an owner that understands the value of the built environment, because that's what draws the students. That's what makes this a premier learning institution. It's mutually beneficial for both the community as well as the university, the college. We both want the same thing, a high quality environment. So the idea is to bring that philosophy onto the site. We start, of course, with the access. Off the southern, we're going to have our principal access. The commercial sites in this area here, we have a secondary access just to the west. B Road will have a single access to the college, and I'll share that with you in a little bit. And there'll be 2 accesses to the commercial property because we're sharing an entry road. We are going to be preserving these wonderful natural resources on the site, and as we've been talking about, the 50-foot buffer along the edge in this area is generally what it looks like here. We will be maintaining the native vegetation that's there. What was talked about in the guidelines was removing the invasives and planting it with 2 layers of understory that will become opaque within, I believe, 5-year periods.
Now, just to get our arms around how far this is from the, which would be the north side of the canal bank. So the canal is typically, what, 30 feet wide?
You actually have 60-foot right of way.
60 foot, and does that include the canal maintenance?
You have the draft on that.
Yeah,
The canal maintenance there, so actually, it's really not a 50-foot buffer, it's more like a 100-foot buffer.
yeah, you'll see that. You'll see that in a sec. Yeah, there it is. You're absolutely right. So you have generally 110 foot.
110 feet, so we're really talking about 110 feet.
From the adjacent property, yes, sir. In addition to that buffer, there will be, as Mr. Seymour had pointed out many times, this additional 25-foot along the public right-of-way on B Road as well as Southern. We are also providing a 25-foot buffer along the western property line. And the idea there is that those buffers would preserve the vegetation that's there, and they would be augmented with the material that we have spec'd in the guidelines. Then between the commercial development and the college site, we have a 10-foot green buffer. Now, the 250-foot zone that we talked about, the height restriction zone, where the buildings would be 35 feet or 2 stories, is in this area here. And again, as Mr. Seymour mentioned, 50% of that area will be preserved as open. So it's not as if there's going to be an entire building along that Main Street. Now, one of the things my partner mentioned when we were here in November was that the intent of the natural setting, what makes this feel like a naturalistic site, is not to have clear, distinct lines, but to appreciate the natural, organic forms that you find in that setting. So when you actually are standing here, you're going to see this buffer, but actually that wetland and this wetland here also contributes to the greening of that entire edge. So you really have the beneficial value of quite a bit of contributing environment and contributing landscape. And that's what's captured in what you have before you. This is the master site development plan that we have that takes these principles and defines them with the respective areas that go along the side here. So one thing that we've been focusing on is that that's 50 years out. What we're going to be doing initially is generally the development in this area. The whole northern piece of this parcel is going to remain pretty much undisturbed, with the exception of the access road that we're going to come over to Bean Road. So we're going to have the college, as we mentioned, for the first 10 years, approximately plus or minus in that lower southern piece. Now, what we've tried to do with these guidelines is basically break them down into two pieces. To have site plan as well as architectural and character guidelines that capture the spirit of the place, that capture where there's value on this land in the natural setting. And we start with the site plan. The idea here, as this points out, is to preserve the character and natural resources and a connectivity to the rest of the community on this site. The way that we've done that was, as you see with SP1, and again, it was demonstrated in the Palm Beach Gardens campus. Clustering is going to be important, bringing the buildings to the interior of the site, creating pedestrian areas in the center of the site. That allows us to maintain as much vegetation around the perimeter. It also increases the amount of buffer space that we have, or setback, if you will, basically the open space that is surrounding the community. Those spaces would be designed around quads. And again, just like in the Palm Beach Gardens example, they become the living rooms for the college. And that also allows us to keep a lot of the natural vegetation within those open quads. The building setbacks are designed to be compatible with the adjacent uses. Of course, we've been talking about the northern edge as well, but from the east, west, and south, the whole idea is if we cluster the buildings around the center of the site, we're going to have a naturalistic edge around this campus. And that's what we try to do in the guidelines, is encourage that density around the center.
Before you go,
Sure.
could you go back one?
Yeah,
please?
absolutely.
If you could put just a visual of what a two-story building would look like there in that, and then kind of draw a sight line to show, because some folks had question of, a two-story building or a five-story building, just so someone could see.
I wish this was the scale. I'm not sure this is the scale.
We tried when we did this.
Is that what the white line is?
Well, if this is probably a 20-foot horse here, so that's the problem with this. If this is 50 feet, right, 20 feet, you're talking about a building that's this tall, so that's what I mean. We had to increase the graphic to be able to get the point across so you could read it in that area. So
we did try to compare where the two-story would be roughly to where the height of the trees are. We'll see if we can scale in something like that.
Yeah, because then if you had a sight line.
Yeah, that's a good point. So you
Yeah.
can appreciate the scale. Yeah,
Yeah.
I understand.
It's called Troy.
Sorry?
Troy.
It's like little soldiers inside that. No. The SP2 standard is intended to preserve the Florida woodland feel that we have on the site. And it's going to be brought in to the surrounding buffers that we have. So we don't want to create a manicured edge around this. We want to take the landscaping that's already located there and augment it So it's not intended to be removed and then placed with, if you will, manicured edges around the building. So the northern property line, the 50 foot that we talked about, 25 around the perimeter and 10 between the commercial parcel. We will also use native landscaping throughout the campus to take the palette that's currently there and extend it to the new landscaping that's being brought onto the campus. And that will help us integrate in our passive and active areas. There will be fields. There will also be places to read outdoors. We're going to be encouraging outdoor learning as much as they do in the Palm Beach Gardens campus. It's a very inviting place to learn outdoors. Parking around the campus, the northern property line, one of the things that we had mentioned there is that it's not a wall that we're planning landscape material.
Yeah,
And there's going to be 2 tiers, 4 and 8 feet tall. And that's, the intent there is to visually screen that area. We will, of course, be providing canopy trees in all of the parking lots, again in a naturalistic setting, similar to what we did at Pine Jog, where they're not lined up, but they create that organic feel. The sidewalks and lighting will be provided. And we're also going to make a special effort to provide accent paving by introducing grass blocks, perhaps pavers, porous asphalt, to create a variety of horizontal surfaces on the campus. The architectural guidelines are intended to capture the spirit of the buildings that are discussed in the rule guidelines. That's what we're trying to do here, within the fact that these are going to be college buildings. And that's precisely what was done on Pine Jog. What Pine Jog, what we did there is, this is FAU. This is Palm Beach District Schools. It is possible to blend school buildings within a naturalistic setting so you still feel like you're in an environment that is part of nature. So what we tried to do is to create the palette, the structure, so we could achieve this by taking our buildings and breaking them down, modulating. We don't have any long facades. And the way that happens is by articulating roof lines, by minimizing footprints, and that's what that section of the guideline is trying to do. And that's also helped by the materials on the architecture. This is in fact Pine Jog again, that's concrete. And what we did is we basically took the bark of the trees in the area, and that became the form liner for the trees. So you could do stuff with stucco, with concrete, but doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to look like it belongs in Boca. You could create and craft stucco and concrete to have it tie into the environment, just like we did in these buildings. What are we going to, the roof forms, we're going to utilize our roofs. Some will be flat, some will be sloped. The idea is that we think it's important to have terraces, to have second-story areas that open up and enjoy the setting. So we're trying to build that into the guidelines as well. Sustainability will be important in the entire development of the project. Of course, we're going to have a natural light, but we're also going to have views. We're going to be screening them, providing louvers, providing lotions, providing a whole vocabulary. So as you're circulating within this campus, you're engaging the exterior environment, becomes part of the experience. And wayfinding and signage throughout the campus, so we understand where the various buildings are. Also identifying the entrance along Southern. So in general, what we're trying to do is to take the spirit and essence of what the site is, what the architectural vocabulary is, and interpret it in a way that we have the flexibility of creating a campus that will be very, very much like what we have at Palm Beach Gardens, what we have down the street at Pine Jog. That's what this structure is intended to do in these guidelines, to supplement to the state guidelines.
If there are any questions or any more comments, other than what we've already heard, obviously we've got all those, but if there's anything else, the idea is that we can take this feedback and see what we can incorporate into these guidelines, if you have any specifics, and then if we can't, we try to come back and tell you why and what could or couldn't.
Keith, you want to start?
I'm not prepared to make comment at this time.
Okay.
And certainly, if you all comment back through Mr. Cutney or Mr. Fleischman, they get back to us as well.
What's the purpose of the B road access? I'm curious. Can anybody answer that?
Yes, because we have our traffic engineer. It's about time he spoke. He's been here for this whole meeting. Adam Kerr with Kimley Horn Associates, who's a traffic engineer, can talk about it. The short version for layman, because I don't understand all the traffic calculation stuff either, is it relates primarily to safety and to the ability to make certain turning movements at the light at B Road, but he can talk a little bit more.
Adam Kerr with Kimley Horn Associates. The primary reason for that B road access is to provide exiting traffic a way to turn left on Southern Boulevard and go to destinations to the east. The access on Southern Boulevard, there are no crossovers allowed by FDOT. So this way the traffic goes out to B Road and then immediately goes down to Southern where the traffic light is. And then continue. That's the primary reason.
So that connection would be part of the first phase.
Yes.
So even though only the front part of that property is traffic reaction?
Not all.
Not all. There's still
Anybody wanting to go east?
Right.
Yeah, leaving to go east, they would go up that way now.
Well, they also have the option of cutting through the commercial low property, because they're gonna have an exit there at what would be Tangerine.
Theoretically, over time, some of the movements will do that. We don't know, we can't coordinate timing and how everything will work with that, but, and frankly, Adam did a detailed numbered analysis of how that would all work. And I called and said, what does that all mean? And he tried to tell me and I didn't understand anyway, which is why he's here. So, yeah, at some point, some of that will happen, but you still want, you don't want all that traffic going through the commercial either for safety purposes.
Gotcha. All right. Lawrence? Any comments?
The vocabulary and the thematics are what I'm in.
Okay, does this require any
This was here, I think, just for discussion. If you want to give any feedback, it's got to come back to you for formal review at the appropriate time. When your summer meetings, I would anticipate.
Okay.
Mike, if we do have any recommendations, it would be okay to just send them over to the town manager pertaining to this?
Well, you could, but there won't be anything that, it would just be individual
Will
comments
it get
back.
back to them?
I'm sure they can forward it on, yes. It just won't have any benefit of the board's knowledge of that information,
No, I
discussion. so.
understand.
But there'll be further discussion.
Well, it has to come back to you as a formal application. You know, I guess the master plan's coming, for lack of a better term, like a site plan. So you will be seeing it. At that time, you will be doing the same, you'll be reviewing it, making recommendations to the town council who has to formally approve that. That's within your.
Yeah, the application has been filed. I think we're shooting for a May 10 to come back to you with a formal presentation. It will be very similar to what you just saw.
And then we would adopt the design guidelines as part of that.
I think it's a recommendation.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, but
recommendation.
the design guidelines are part of that master plan.
It's part of the application
Yeah.
process.
There's all the things that you wanted in the comp plan, you kept pushing off for that.
Yes.
So now you better get them then.
Yes, that's why I asked.
She will.
So, but yeah, so
It's a
that's.
great project. It will be great for this community.
It doesn't, this one does not need to be rezoned. This is
Correct.
already zoned for, so
Correct.
you just have to do the master plan.
Yes.
The next one I guess you're gonna be taking a look at, will have that additional step.
All right. Jim, what's our next thing? I see we still have Land Design South here. Are they on the agenda?
Yeah, we had a vote down in the beginning.
The same concept at the college, that presented discussion, and you will have formal action at the next meeting or in June?
PCD depends on
That,
PUD does.
that might be a little
Oh, yeah,
later,
PUD.
because that's more involved.
That one would require zoning, so that might be a different timeline.
something similar to this. Did you get the agenda back? Oh, okay. That has three documents. Drawings like a real state. The second is a retro chat. Third one is putting that together. One package. Original recipe. And then two houses. Almost like it's on the. Yeah, but yeah, maybe that's what, that's really the only shot that the town's gonna get. Once they get the master plan approval, that's not a new shot. And all of the regulations. Well, the county. So we don't need to. In that state approval, we're still. Yeah, we're still actually. State college issued its own building permit. So 1.5 years. State college will issue building permits. The state will review and make sure that we get state. Water management district. Water control.
Whenever you're ready, Brian, we can get moving on the LT for the where you at? I'm ready. All right, well, let's not get.
All right, no problem. For the record, I'm Bob Dennis with Land Design South. We have been working with the town of Lockett Grove.
We have one conversation with.
We've been working with the town of Lockett Groves for several years, actually, and actually we were the first one on your agenda tonight, but we didn't say anything. We were the original comprehensive plan amendment. Actually, we were supposed to be in front of the college, but we allowed them to get in front of us, so that's why we're at the end of your agenda. I think we're trying to utilize the concept that we're wearing you down, so go quicker. We actually have a lot more detail on our particular project than what you probably have seen in the past. We have, again, we originally submitted the comprehensive plan amendment back in 2009. So in 2009, we filed the comprehensive plan amendment for the entire Simon property last summer. We did receive the original approval, and of course today we're modifying that approval. We also participated, and I know that many of you also participated in a workshop that was held back in September of 2010, a little over a year and a half ago. It specifically addressed this property and the property across the street relative to how they were going to look at how they would ultimately be designed. So that's also been part of the process. In addition to that, we probably had I'm going to say a dozen meetings with the public meetings of the town over the last several years. In addition, we participated in the last two workshops that the college also had, as well as most recently we were involved in the one that just occurred a few weeks ago. So anyway, on that note, let me give you kind of an overview of what we're talking about. This entire parcel, 97 acres. I think as you are well aware, you probably will dream about tonight. The college is 75 acres. The commercial parcel, which is a commercial low parcel, is 21.7 acres. It is roughly the same size as what was previously approved on the MLU that was approved last summer. I'm going to take the area in yellow, I'm going to blow that area up, and we'll talk about some details relevant to this portion of the overall site. Again, it is 21.7 acres. It is proposed to accommodate 94,000 square feet. That somewhat odd number comes from the overall building coverage for the property. In fact, we discussed that earlier tonight. 94,000 square feet is a 10% building coverage on the site. I know that Joyce commented on it earlier. You typically find, for example, in the county, you'll find building coverages that are normally around 35%. In the town of Lockett Groves, you're at 10%. So you're a very, very low building coverage, which basically means low buildings or a small amount of buildings on the overall property, relatively large amount of open space or pervious area on the overall site. We do have a few access points into the property. We have one off of B Road, which is actually an extension of Tangerine Road, which we'll show you here in just a moment. And we have two access points off of Southern Boulevard, one right in the middle of the property, and the second one, which we actually share with the college. The college is actually going to be constructing that as their main entranceway off of Southern Boulevard, and we will share that access point with the college. And that actually is the extension of Tangerine Drive into the overall property.
Where is Tangerine Drive now? If you
Well,
point
it
to
doesn't,
where-
it's not on this map.
Right,
It's
but if
way,
it were,
where would it come through at?
yeah, isn't it higher?
How many feet north is it? Do you remember about that? Yeah, I think it is roughly about that dimension. We actually had that discussion with the property owner to the east earlier today about where is it going to be located. But it's going to meander through their property. I know they're getting ready to file a site plan, but it's our proposal, we tie into it roughly this location, and you'll see why here in about 10 seconds here when I show you the next slide.
It's very difficult to see on this aerial, but if you kind of follow this alignment through the adjoining property, it's
Right around there.
roughly in that same location. We might be, 100 feet or so off of that, but it's right in the same location.
And Tangerine originally was intended to go all the way to the western boundary of the property. I think as you heard also mentioned earlier tonight, the college does not want to go through their property for probably some obvious reasons. So that road, Tangerine, will terminate at the college's entryway. But the good news is that if you do live in Lock 50 Grove, if you do want to go to the college and Tangerine is constructed, we'll be able to get all the way to the commercial property and all the way over to Tangerine, all the way over to the college by utilizing Tangerine Drive. I'm now going to lay on top of the property a copy of our site plan that we have submitted to the town for approval. We are much more detailed than what you've seen with the college because, again, we are a private development project coming through the process. And there's some key factors that I'm going to walk you through relevant to the site plan. Also, I'm going to give you some overall architectural drawings about how we got to where we are today relevant to the site. One of the key factors is the property. It's labeled there as Tangerine Road Extension. There are two main access roads that kind of bite or intersect within our site. The first one is our main access drive, again in the middle of the property off of Southern Boulevard. It really forms the north-south entryway into the property. It is a tree-lined boulevard coming into the parcel and does terminate really at Tangerine Drive. And the other major road, of course, is Tangerine itself. The two of these will intersect at the middle of the site, and at this location is really kind of the epicenter of our overall design. The majority of the retail tenants, about 70% of them, are actually located right along this area, not square footage wise, but individual tenants. We have probably about 50 to 20 tenants in the overall site, the majority of which will be located in these two buildings here along the northern boundary. It has been the desires of the town that they would utilize Tangerine Drive as kind of your main street in Loxahatchee Grove. The intent was to have the commercial stores located along that main driveway as you enter or as it's in the commercial areas of the town itself. And that is what we attempted to do in this particular design itself. In addition to it, in fact, let me go back to this for 1 second. There are a couple of other things that occur at the intersection of Tangerine and the north-south entry drive into the property, and that is on the north side here, we have kind of a common plaza area between two retail buildings. It looks small here because of the scale of the overall drawing, but the intent of that is to be an outdoor plaza for dining, etc., for the two retail buildings on both sides of it. In addition to that, it extends across the little access drive into the rear of the building and provides kind of a little outlook over the lake area, which again dominates the northern 25% or so of the overall property. The next major element, again, of course, is the lake on the property. The lake is about 6.5 acres in size. It's about 30% of the overall property. It is relatively large for the size of the property, and as you heard me mention earlier, we only have a 10% building coverage, hence we have the opportunity of having other portions of the property in green space area, including the lake and retention area on the northern boundary of the property. We also have the area in yellow, which is a multi-purpose pedestrian and equestrian trail that will circle around the lake, and it is our intent to tie it back into B Road and up to the Clifton Canal, so you could, in theory, ride your horse to the property. We don't want you to mix with the cars in the parking lot, but you'd be able to enter that open space area of the property itself. Yes?
Yeah, Bob, is there any work that you've done with state DOT as far as using that lake, as far as some of the retention for the widening of State Road 80?
Not for Southern Boulevard, no. However, for the widening and the improvements to B Road, we will be taking some of that retention from B Road and putting it in this retention area as well as the college will, as well as the property owners on the east side. So we'll have some roadway drainage in it, but not for Southern Boulevard, no. Only for the site itself. I will tell you that overall, there's about a 25% retention requirement on the assignment property, which is high. Typically in the county, you find about a 10 to 15%. It's particular area of the county because of the C-51 canal, which is the West Palm Beach Canal. On the south side is on the boulevard. You have an extraordinarily large amount of water retention requirements in this area, which basically means more water, more green space, which from the community perspective is a positive thing. Some other elements of the overall site that I wanted to talk about, and this is kind of an unusual element, and that's the area that we highlighted here in yellow. When you first enter the site along this Tangerine extension off of B Road, on the south side, which is this area right here, I'll blow that area up, is a little community plaza area. It's roughly a ½ acre in size, and basically it's extra green space that we have on the property that we incorporated into the overall design of the site. And the intention behind that area is to have a place where you could have, let's say, a green market or a public art display, or maybe a small concert or things like that. It can be a public community space. It's kind of associated with the overall commercial property itself. So typically, these are retail gathering locations, and it's been our intent to add in kind of a community park area along with the overall site on the south side. And that is at, like I said, at the entrance way off of B Road into the property. I don't think we'll have quite that many trees, but again, the intent of it is to have a central feature in the middle of it, like a gazebo element, which again you could use for a variety of community or public events. I mentioned the amount of open space on the property when we had the September 2010 event. One of the elements was the community wanted to see 40% pervious area. This site has in excess of 50% of the property is actually impervious or open space areas. So quite a bit of the property even exceeded what the town had asked us to do back during that workshop on the overall property. The next thing I want to talk a little bit about is architecture. I mean, there's been a lot of discussions about the rural guidelines you have in Loxahatchee Groves. Unlike the college, we're not restricted by the state, so we have focused in on what the community has asked for. We've taken a look at what you have in kind of Loxahatchee Groves, a little bit of the history of Loxahatchee Groves overall, and we've kind of taken a look at some of the character of the architecture that you've had. I kind of like this building for the next, you'll see in just a moment, but if you look at some of the elements of this residence of this house, I mean, of course, it has that wood siding on it, it has, the metal roof, it has the porch, has a little awning over the porch roof. And if you take a look at that building for 1 second and you compare it to this commercial building up in Jupiter Farms, you'll see a lot of similarities between the two buildings architecturally. And that's kind of been our intent. Our intent has been to take some of the elements that you would typically find in a rural community and integrate them in our overall design. Again, you've got the gable-end roofs that you had in the other design, you've got the wooden siding, you have the porch look, you've got the metal roofs again. So those are again some of the elements that we thought would be good to have. Again, we've gone through your rural character design. We've looked at a lot of the elements that you have, and we've identified a list of what those elements are. I think to kind of maybe help summarize it, take a look at what we've identified here are some of the key factors in Loxahatchee that I think designated as being more of a rural area. Some of the elements that we want to incorporate in our overall design, which is different than most retail centers. Again, is that wood siding look, probably a hardy plank type of material. The metal roofs, the porches, which I think are definitely key to capturing that rural look. Roof structure, cupolas, dormers, drop-off areas such as that, I think are also key and important to the overall design. There's a number of different window treatments that you can have, everything from shutters to the way you actually form the window to the grid in the window themselves. So there's a lot of things you can actually accomplish there. Kind of summarize it really as that rural character, but also sort of that Florida vernacular design. And again, those are some of the elements that we've incorporated in our design that we did for the center. Next, I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the elevations that we have generated and you can get your feedback on them. Again, trying to capture some of that rural character from your guidelines. First image I'm going to show you is that little purple arrow. That would be as if you were standing basically there looking at the site. This is a perspective sketch that really looks down Tangerine, which again is this Main Street look that we're trying to accomplish along Tangerine Drive. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we are taking the two main retail buildings with the majority of the tenants located within them, and we're locating them again along the north side of Tangerine Drive itself. On the south side of the road, we're also limiting the amount of access. We don't have a lot of access points into a parking lot. Instead, we're having a pedestrian way along that south side. We're looking at possibly integrating some architectural features, such as possibly some arbors, some benches, some other elements, again, to help continue that pedestrian scale on both sides of the street. Some of the key factors, again, that we're trying to put into the overall design are, again, the roof structures, the metal roofs, the cupolas, those dormers, Again, the siding that we mentioned to you earlier, I doubt it's gonna be actual wood, but again, the idea of having the hardy plank of that wood look, I think, is also key. And again, with the whole arbor and arcade porch area along the entire front facade of this building, as well as all of the buildings in the overall site. This is an elevation that the architect actually prepared. Doesn't look quite as sexy, but it kind of gives you an overall view, still some of the elements we're trying to capture. Again, you still have the metal roofs, the cupolas, the dormers, the porches, the arcade area that you would have along the front of the building itself. And I think you probably will have copies of those in the future when staff gets give you some more detail on the overall buildings themselves. The next building I want to talk about also has another perspective sketch of that building. It is a larger building. And this building itself is intended to be a grocery store type tenant, but isn't necessarily a grocery store. But again, it is intended to be a larger tenant on the property, kind of basically an anchor tenant for the overall center itself. Again, we have 94,000 square feet. It's important to have an anchor tenant on that property. And again, that is what the intent of this building is.
What's the square footage of that?
Building, roughly, we're showing it today is 45,000 square feet. So it's roughly half the square footage is that one building on the overall property. And again, the side of this building also is adjacent to and fronts along Tangerine Road. So again, we have this building on Tangerine, even though it is a larger building, and the side of the building is in the rear side.
One of the things I noticed on, back on your previous architectural sketch, is you had the metal roofs, and then there was this whole big section where we had the store name above there. That looks a little industrial to me. What I would prefer seeing there is that we have the roof line come down to the our arcade area. And then if there's gonna be a sign for that building, then have like a placard on the roof, that would be, not part of the roof, but in other words, the sign, would just extend above, so that we got the whole, so we're not cutting the roof off, and we got this big, flat, industrial-looking signage.
I think what another idea, I actually agree with you. And again, these are some of the details that we can talk about again at another meeting, but another consideration might be is the ability to treat each individual sign, actually hang it from the roof to almost like a sandblasted wooden sign look to it. I've seen that done, and it's very effective and very attractive too. So I think there's a couple ways of treating that. So I know I'm going fast because I know you're tired and you've been here a long time. I don't want to.
Oh no, don't keep going.
Okay. I'll slow down. I only have 40 more slides to go through. So. In any case, we are taking several of the elements, again, that you find in the Western communities and rural architecture. And again, we're trying to copy some of those elements or utilize those elements. I'm going to say copy, but utilize those elements. Again, the overall design, again, the idea of having the dormers on the building, the very siding for the actual building, of course, the metal roof treatment, again, the building arcade, the various elements that you would find in other buildings in Loxahatchee as well as in other communities. Then again, try to utilize that rural character. So again, no matter how big or small the building is, it is our intent to make all of the buildings continue with that rural theme that we know Loxahatchee Groves is very, very sensitive to and all.
Lawrence, did you have a question?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can't really buy into the rural thing, but, it looks like suburban sprawl, but could you go back to the site plan?
Sure.
You know what, I'll get it. It would seem logical that if you're going to sort of an urban design, that you might plan for the future in the sense of more urban vocabulary, like dropping that Publix down and being able to do facing retail on the south side. A lot of times when you have these, it really is, ends up, sort of have to realize what it really is and the future might be more successful if you had facing.
Each
I mean,
other?
if you're trying to create a Main Street road, which is what I hear,
Talk about
the urban vocabulary for that is really to have facing structures. And it's more density, but it's not really, it's not rural and it's not So, I mean, for a healthier future, I mean, you really have to suggest that if you drop that A and P and allow for
Another row
facing
of
buildings
retail.
in the future.
I mean, let me just address
Going
this.
up.
I mean, what you're challenged with is, of course, we're not an urban area. I mean, we want to have some urban design elements, but at the same time, we want to remain rural. So we're trying to integrate somewhat different and diverging interests in our rural center. At the same time, we want it to be a successful retail center. So those are all, I think, key elements we want to accomplish. And design-wise, it's a challenge. I mean, there's absolutely no question about that. Trying to have a quote-unquote roadway or a main street running through the middle of a retail project is a challenge. I mean, yes, it's done in City Place, but that's in a very urbanized environment with a tremendous amount of intensity. I mean, their density there is 20 times the density that we have here, of course. So I think the goal here, and what we try to accomplish in that is with the architecture of the buildings, trying to capture that rural theme with the building design. If I look at the John Deere dealership does have a parking lot. You gotta be able to park to go there. It's on the side of that building. Same thing we have here. We have, and I'm gonna talk about parking in fact in just a second. Yeah, that's my next point actually. But again, that is a key element here. I mean, our goal has been not to, for example, you'll note these green areas here in front of these buildings, so we don't have a series of parking aisles that are bisecting this section here along the south side of Tangerine. We have continuous green space corridors there, and you can actually create a pedestrian element or amenity within those areas. That's kind of what our goal has been. At the same time, providing parking for those particular tenants. So really, we're trying to combine a lot of features and factions really within one overall design, and that's been the challenge.
You're going to have thousands of students probably walking into here.
We would love that, of course, yes. You know, that's probably going to be 50 years when we're all dead. And I think we're trying to accommodate that. I think if you look at the larger building here, we have a small retail building on the north side of it. Again, we've attempted to create a pedestrian access drive on both, walkways on both sides of Tangerine Drive to kind of serve that community. And we're also trying to create a place for you to tie your horse up. So we're trying to accommodate the student, we're trying to accommodate the car, and we're trying to accommodate the horse. Our hitching post area, by the way, is actually tended to be right here at that little pedestrian trail that we showed you at the very beginning, which is kind of a mixed bag of items. It can't be a pedestrian and an equestrian trail, but our intent is to have a couple of different trails within that corridor area. But it's our goal to have a hitching post on the north side. But at the same time, we also recognize the fact that we can't have it interface with the college, and you can't interface with the cars. So it is an important factor that we separate all those elements. So these are some of the design challenges that we are faced with in the overall property. And again, that's why, coming down from the north, which is where a horse would come, the first thing it's going to come to is the largest open space area on the property, which would be conducive to having an equestrian in that area. Let me go on to one more thing. So I'm talking about parking spaces, which I think is relevant. This is our parking lot for the overall property. In Lock City Groves, it may not be the largest city in the state of Florida, but you do have the largest parking spaces in the state. And the parking space criteria in the city or in town is 11.5 by 22.5 foot wide parking spaces. This is not beyond pickup trucks. This is in the dualies. You give you an example, and I know you're not going to like it when I say this, but your average parking space in unincorporated Palm Beach County is 9.5 feet wide compared to 11.5 feet wide and 18.5 feet in depth versus 22.5 feet in depth. I know the city of West Palm, where Grace works, you go down to, I think, 8 or 8.5 foot spaces because it's more quote-unquote urban.
And then the compact space.
And then you have the compact space, on top of that, right, exactly. So I mean, it's very, very tight. Well, the point to be raised here is that 6.5 acres of the property basically is a pavement, based on that size of the parking space. Our proposal, which will be a waiver request that will come through the PUD section of your code, which you have yet to review, is to make the spaces 10-foot by 20-foot parking spaces on the site, which requires 4.75 acres of pavement, about a 30-35% less asphalt than what you would have if you had the larger parking spaces on the property. And that is, by the way, a large parking space. 10 by 20 is a big parking space.
It's a long-car garage.
Yes. And in addition to that, if you are concerned, what our recommendation would be that, well, we have handicap spaces, we have spaces for moms with baby carriages, well, let's have parking spaces specifically for larger vehicles. I mean, we certainly can take a certain percentage of the parking spaces and maybe set them aside for larger vehicles and mark them as such. But to make every parking space that size in an era where we're trying to preach a sustainability and pervious area probably isn't the most sustainable thing to do. So we would suggest respectfully that you reduce the size of those parking spaces. And we'll come to that with the waiver. Not all of them, but, you know, the majority of those spaces, you know.
Comment to that? I would go even a step further because I really think staff needs to analyze that. Bob, how many parking spaces do you have with the reduction? What's the total number?
We have about, I think, 450 parking spaces total in the overall site.
What's the required number?
About that, about 450 parking spaces,
Okay.
yes.
Because the first thing I think of when I look at this site plan is definitely not rural. So if there's a way to, like you say, I mean, a certain percentage of the parking spaces, and maybe it's 10% or maybe it's 20%, be larger, and you can scatter them throughout the site, and the rest would be standard parking, and even a step